What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And this is the podcast where we get into the deeper meaning of your favorite film directors' films. And this episode is a good one because guess what? The biggest movie this year and the biggest movie in a while was The Last Jedi. And that was directed by a filmmaker known as Rian Johnson. So we're going to be going through all the Rian Johnson films with Last Jedi, Brick, Brothers Bloom, and Looper. So there's not too many films to dive into. We're going to start in order of the release dates. So if you want to see The Last Jedi review, we're going to get to that eventually, but unfortunately that's going to be at the end of the show. We're also going to talk about spoilers and different things that we felt about the movie.
Very spoiler heavy.
It's going to be spoiler heavy, and we're definitely going to be giving our honest opinions, because that's what we're all about here. We're all about honesty. Unfiltered honesty. Truth. Love. Well, mostly love. But definitely stick around for that as well. But before we do, we always like reading your guys' comments from previous episodes. And our previous episode was baller, because guess what? Everyone listened to that episode.
Oh, yeah. Great ratings.
Man.
All around,
Alexander Payne. Oh, I see you guys, all the Alexander Payne fans out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We know who the real film fans are.
Real film fans are.
Cinephiles, you know.
Pretty much didn't do well, guys, but it's okay because we like Alexander Payne. And we still feel like it's a good decision to do an episode on him and to shine a light on different directors. So we want to be reading your comments from the previous episode, and let's start with Movie Ace. Great name. He says, Payne has so many underrated films. Nebraska, The Descendants, Election, Sideways, but my absolute favorite is About Schmidt. That ending always touches me, and I can see myself in Nicholson's character. I'm very afraid of living the life he does, and thinking about how meaningless my life has been, seeing back on it, and I'm just 27. I've also worked at an insurance company. So it's always cool to see like people relate to film on a personal level. What like little aspects, whether it be big aspects, because obviously Movie Ace doesn't relate to him on an age level, but on a like employee level, he can kind of relate to that too. So. Yeah,
and then plus just the whole idea of finding meaning through people. You know, we kind of mentioned it last week. You know, with About Schmidt, that ending is all about, you know, that one little thing that you contribute to, that you help, that one person that you help writing back to you. That's the most powerful thing, and man. Every time like that ending comes on, it's like just hits you right in the heart.
Yeah, so, and I like, and I mentioned this already, but I like being able to identify yourself in someone that you don't think you might be able to. Like the perfect example for me that I always go back to is Lady Bird. Mm-hmm. Like going into Lady Bird, man, I was like, sure, teenage girl, sure. Yeah. But coming out, I was like, damn, I have a lot of similarities to her when I have growing up, and it's one of those things I did not expect. So that's a good thing.
Especially a movie like Lady Bird. I think like both men and women connect to that movie just like equally the same. You know?
And you find little moments and little things that you can connect to, right? And I found a lot of moments in Lady Bird, but that's always cool. Let's jump over to Schmoeville. Also, guys, I post on Schmoeville if you guys want to join that page.
Facebook.
James Golding says, Nebraska. I'm asking what's his favorite, Alexander Payne film.
Yeah.
He said Nebraska. But with those sweeping shots of the countryside, I'm not sure they were done justice being shot black and white.
That's a good point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think? Because you like it being shot black and white.
Yeah, I think the whole black and white nature adds to like the sharpness of it. You know what I mean? The contrast of like ideas between, the family members and like particularly with the son and the father. You know, the father has played by Bruce Dern, has a very different outlook on life than say his son does. You know, he's very different generational kind of millennial kind of dude. So I thought it was really funny. Having it black and white to set that compare and contrast, and plus I just don't think we have enough black and white movies. Sure. You know what I mean? So like
I told you last time when we were talking about it, I said it's such a bold decision to make it black and white because you already alienate like half of an audience. In my opinion, because watching a trailer that's in black and white, I can't lie, part of me is like, I kind of don't want to see that just because it's in black and white, because it's a very bold decision to do that. And yeah, it's funny because most of the time Nebraska was pretty applauded for being black and white, but here James saying it might have been a mistake. Could have been better to do a cool cinematography kind of view
with the color and
with
all
the
that.
color.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know what was Brokeback Mountain set? Was that set in Nebraska?
Ooh, I don't know.
I don't know. But that had like some really nice sweeping shots too, but like that was the use of color.
Sure.
In that, but I don't know. That was probably sound like Montana or something. So
you're probably way off.
Yeah.
We also have a comment from Paul Oyama. who says his favorite is Sideways is probably my personal favorite, but I absolutely love Citizen Ruth. And I recently studied it in film school. Ooh, interesting. Yeah. Because you go to film school.
Yeah. I mean, Citizen Ruth is definitely something you could take a look at. Sideways, though, is incredible. I didn't know this until Mark Riley tweeted this, but apparently that's one of his top 5 movies of all time. Yeah.
Okay.
Sideways. So,
and did he randomly tweet that, or?
I think it was like randomly. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if he listened to our show.
Okay, I was gonna say, yo, Riley's. No, he's probably not.
yeah. But no, it is. Yeah. I mean, it's a great movie. And, and we kind of broke it down last week, just the way it handles his characters.
Sure.
It feels real. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's read.
Citizen Ruth is great too.
One more. Brady Warren says, Election easily. It's in my top 10 favorite of all time. I'm going to check out the podcast later, by the way. Cool, man. Check it out.
I hope you're one of the 250 people that eventually got around to see it.
Man, we got them views, man. We got them views. Election is another one that we probably agree that it's probably our favorite, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely between Sideways and Election to me.
To me, it was between Descendants and Election. Yeah. But Election is always up there. It's probably my favorite Alexander Payne film.
Yeah, and it's so, it's like we said last week, it's made by MTV. So it's a little more accessible than all of his movies. They give you the voiceover, they give you the title cards and all that stuff. So it's a little easier to grasp, but
yeah, absolutely. And always, guys, make sure to leave us comments on Schmoville or on the YouTube channel. Again, we will be reading them just like we did now. And now we're gonna jump into Mr. Rian Johnson, all his films, and we're gonna start with his first film, which is Brick, which came out in 2005. And I can't lie, you've seen this movie before. I've seen this movie. This was kind of like an indie darling type movie where it was like it kind of did well in the indie circuit as far as getting some attention.
Right. It won the special jury prize at Sundance when it came out. $450,000 budget. Right, $450,000.
I didn't know that. That's crazy.
So it was like
it's really indie.
It didn't make a lot, but it definitely made a smash like around like the small like circles that it became in.
I've seen, if you see the poster, it has a quote by Peter Travers, who says something like it'll keep you in the edge of your seat or something like that. But the fact that Peter Travers reviewed it, I mean, good on them, because he's a very well-known critic from the Rolling Stone. I've been keeping up with Peter Travers for years. But basically, this is Rian Johnson's first film. It stars obviously JGL. And I can't lie, man, I told you, because I've seen Looper, and I've seen Looper before I've seen Brick, so I expect the grittiness of Looper and the kind of seriousness of Looper. So going into Brick, I was like, I'm going to get that with this movie. As soon as the movie starts out, it's hyper real. Because JGL is talking to some people, and that's not how people talk. Yeah. They talk so fast. Hey, man, you dealing with that? Yeah, he's dealing with the girl. Oh, all right, with the girl. What is he going to do with tonight? Oh, I don't know, man. Oh, where's Emily at? I don't know. Where do you think Emily's at? I don't know. Where do you think she's at? And it's like, what? What is going on? Right. They're all talking hyper fast, and it's hyper real, and it's a little bit more over the top than I thought it would be. It's very over the top, actually. And I expected Rian Johnson to be like a serious, gritty filmmaker, kind of like Looper's a little gritty. And that is not this movie at all, man. It's not. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying that's an interesting. It's a very. Brian Johnson is a much more stylized director than I thought he was. Right. You kind of mentioned it before going on camera that it kind of has that Edgar Wright as far as like stylized type of films that he has. But Brick is still like you said, it's a really good movie and it got a lot of attention. What are your general impressions on this movie?
Well, Brick is and I mentioned this to you before, and along with some most people behind the scenes, Brick is one of my favorite movies of all time, right? And all of this, and we're gonna get to Looper too. That's up there too. But the reason being is I've expressed this on this podcast before. Noir is my favorite genre of film. So this movie is very clearly emulating the noir, and not even like neo-noir. It's just straight up something 1940s dialogue, 1940s, like the way it's constructed structurally. It takes a lot from movies like The Maltese Falcon, Double Indemnity, with the femme fatale, the bosses, the crime lords, but it just puts in a high school setting, right? And I think that's what's really fascinating about it. It gives you all of the elements and the tropes and the story points of a noir movie, but takes elements like a assistant vice principal that would normally be like the chief of police or something, or the or the handicapped overage dude just hangs around high school dealing drugs. He's like the main crime boss. He's the pin, and it does, but it takes itself so seriously that it really works.
Sure.
Even when they're like eating cookies or like spooning cereal or whatever, it still feels like a real crime thriller, and that's what really elevates the material, because you really come on the edge of your seat and watching this movie. So I love this movie, man. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt, this is one of his first breakouts.
Yeah.
After Halloween, H2O.
Yeah.
He did that, then he did this.
Well, I mean, he was in.
Yeah, he was in some other things too, like What's in Things I Hate About You.
The TV show too.
Oh yeah, but he wasn't a big name though.
He wasn't.
Yeah, but this was one that kind of put him more in the indie scene, and first collaboration with Rian Johnson. He's appeared in all of his
first
films.
Of many, yeah.
Yeah. So, and even when Joseph Gordon-Levitt did his directorial debut in Don John, he got Nathan Johnson, Rian Johnson's cousin, to do the score for that movie. And speaking of the score, Nathan Johnson composed this, and the score really helps elevate why and what genre is playing in, because it uses like the saxophone, the pianos, the slow instrumentals to really build the heightened realism that you're talking about of like the noir genre.
Sure.
So even though it's like low budget, and it looks a little low budget,
it does
but
at times.
But that's part of it. Like,
sure.
I think that's part of the charm, that's part of the appeal.
Sure.
And especially part of the noir feel, because frankly, when noirs were being made in 1930s and 40s and 50s, they were kind of seen as like the low budget, like as we would consider like indies now.
Sure.
In a way that like studios just kind of throw like like the tax returns at it. You know what I mean? Just to make something off of it, turn a profit, or like cheaper gangster films, basically.
Yeah.
But this movie uses those elements, and it takes visual elements, of course, from like westerns and one of your favorites, Cowboy Bebop, right? The main character is influenced by that.
Sure.
So all of this stuff, it just leads me to having a really great time with this movie.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the kind of low budget feel it has of it. Do you know where this was shot, by the way?
I'm not. It was shot in Rian Johnson's hometown. And the high school was like his actual high school.
Got it.
But I'm not exactly sure.
Sure.
I mean, is he from Maryland?
Well,
right?
so he says he was born in Maryland, but I'm not sure where exactly.
I'm not sure exactly where it's shot either. Yeah, but it was all of his like own locations. So
sure.
When you see
it could be California. It kind of looks like Cali.
It looks like California too. Yeah. But
there's a beach shot too.
Yeah, and the seagulls and whatnot.
Yeah.
And that's also another thing. One of the brilliant things about this movie is use of like birds as like a visual motif, like all the way throughout. And it's kind of, again, another homage to the Maltese Falcon. But yeah, it's beautiful in the way that it feels like whoever shot and directed this movie actually knows the town and knows the city, because it has like its own mini universe in a way.
Sure.
Like
sure.
You can't really see these events happening outside of this little ecosystem.
Yeah. It's interesting because you're gonna have to accept the kind of feel that he's going for in this movie, because it's one of those things where at first it took me like a good 20 minutes before I was kind of in, like as far as being in, because at first I was like, what's going on?
right.
As far as everything's moving so fast. But yeah, it's very interesting in the sense that it does have that low budget feel, and yet it really does deliver in a sense of, obviously JGL is a standout in this, because you can't really put a finger on his character at first, because you're like, I don't know, I'm not sure, is this guy supposed to be the nerdy guy? All right, he's not the nerdy guy. Is this guy supposed to be the tough? He's not the tough guy. Is he supposed to be crazy? Is he supposed to be like, it's such a a mixture of different characters that he's playing with within his own character.
Right.
So that's always interesting. And the fact that it's, like you said, it's about like the two crime bosses or the crime boss, and getting into that whole drug kingpin kind of thing. But basically, we're not going to give too much away, but essentially, this is not a spoiler, by the way. And I know people who say that this is not a spoiler, it's not a spoiler, but it's literally in the synopsis, and it's literally in the first 2 seconds of the film. Yeah. But basically, it's JGL trying to get justice for the murder of his ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
And again, it's in the first 2 seconds of the film. Like, it opens with the shot of her.
Yeah.
So that's essentially what that is about. And he's going through, getting within the ranks of this weird sub-drug empire of this high school, in order to get his own form of justice, and in order to kind of and he really makes it a point to not get the cops involved and to do his own version of what he feels that justice is. And he's like hyper intelligent, and he's like hyper smart, and he knows how to like manipulate people into certain situations, and that's kind of what he was going for. I like his buddy too, Brain. Brain being like, and I like when he literally tells him, he's like, all right, you're gonna be my computer guy or something like that. And he tells him, he's like, all right, you're my computer guy, and I'm like, all right, we literally have a computer guy. He's like playing Batman right now, where he has someone in the computer and he's like telling him what to do and stuff. So I like how he has that aspect of it too. But essentially, it's him finding justice and rising through the ranks and dealing with two super over the top, drug people. You have the Muscle, who's Tug.
Tug.
Who plays like pretty much just the Muscle or the second in command. And then you have the Kingpin, whose name is Pin. And then they kind of have a rift between them, I guess you can say. And then they have two gangs that are kind of going at it.
And you have Laura there too, who's like kind of the weaving in and out of all of these different people. And
that's another character that you can never put your finger on, because I don't know what the hell she's doing
right
half the time. And then same with who's Megan Good. Holy crap,
Megan Good.
Megan Good's in this, because when I saw her I was like, yo, is that Megan Good? Megan Good's in it. And then the guy who plays like the quarterback, I know that guy.
Right. I know. Yeah,
he's in Stomp the Yard.
He is in Stomp the Yard.
Stomp the Yard is like
Stomp
the Yard's a movie I've seen, like, no joke, like 15 times.
Oh, dude, are you kidding?
Because my friends and I used to be really into that.
Oh, really? Oh, the stomping,
the stomping and the dancing and all that, and and then obviously in the beginning with Chris Brown and
getting killed,
and then tie dyes and crumping and all that stuff. Because that's when crumping was at its height.
Oh, dude,
that's when and my friends were really
Chris
into
Brown
it.
was at his height. I remember when that movie came out, like
everyone was like, "Yo, Chris Brown's in this movie," and then he dies in the first 10 minutes, and you're like, "Yo, Chris Brown's not in this movie." But anyways, I know him from Stomp the Yard, because I was like, "Where do I know that guy?" And I went through his IMDb, and I'm like, "Nope, Stomp the Yard, hey!" But Megan Good's in this, and also her character is really weird too, because I don't know half the time what's going on, because at some points she like, it's like I said, it's very hyper realistic. It's very over the top when he like. Every time he talks to Megan Good, I'm like, what is going on? Because I know she's like an insider and she has like a piece of this going on.
She's like speaking code the whole time.
Yeah, and it's always like, I went with blah, blah, blah and did blah, blah, blah and did the blah, blah, blahs. And I'm like, who is who? What? Because she's going so fast. And also the moment when she's in like that clown makeup and she's like crying and then, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Like towards
I'm like, what is going on now? She's like in white face and she's like screaming.
she's like the theater kid, right? So she's about to go on like stage or whatever. No, dude, like I said, like all of these are like just different facets of like the noir.
Yeah, the super crazy stuff, or like the fact that everyone dresses like the boss.
Oh,
right,
like
everyone
with
in,
the white,
the wife beaters.
Tug
and all the wife beaters, and then everyone looks like Dracula. With Pin, because they all dress in all black with like long coats. I thought that was kind of crazy.
And they I thought it was always funny the way they would bring in a lot of these like ancillary characters, like just to kind of fade in and out through like different moments. Like when, I don't want to spoil it, but towards the end, Tug has a big moment with I can't remember the dude's name. But like after that happens, you live with him for just a little bit of time afterwards.
Oh, you mean with Brendan?
With Brendan
JGL's character?
Yeah. But he has a big moment with Tug, and then you spend that time together and kind of start to get a little understand. I think that's what's interesting with Rian Johnson's films and going through all of them. Really, the henchman or the side guy or the muscle are really all complex and like really have something on their shoulder, like a chip on their shoulder, you know what I mean? Same with Tug. We're gonna get into Looper and with The Last Jedi, but all of the side guys are always have like a power struggle happening from within against the authority, and then we see Tug express that really well. We also see Penn get a little bit of his own side too. Like there's not like a really clear cut bad guy, and with the whole last monologue at the end, you even learn that maybe some of your favorite characters aren't the good guys either. You know what I mean? So it's very nice and complex in the way that it handles these mature themes within a high school setting, which
Sure.
could frankly be really silly.
Sure.
But it comes off really authentic. And the way he shoots this movie, I mean, he said he was inspired a lot by like the spaghetti westerns. So the way he uses like the low angle, long shots that, you know, you get, especially in that scene where there's that great chase scene with him and just like a random guy that just shows up out of nowhere.
Yeah, literally a random guy.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on?
Yeah. But that's like a great chase scene because the way it's shot, again, it's like low angle. So you get like the whole like Western
Sure.
kind of feel to it. And when they're chasing each other and running along, the sound effects for the running are just super loud and over the top. Yeah.
Yeah. It literally, like, I was like, damn, those shoes, bro.
Yeah. So it's a lot of great moments like that. And even
Sure.
when he was standing off against the Tug and the Mustang, and it was like they were playing chicken. So stuff like that is really what elevates this movie. But it didn't really perform a lot commercially. It kind of just became like a cult classic in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of that has to do with is anime influence, right? You talk about how overly intelligent this dude is. Like that is very something out of anime. And of course, you know, Johnson's even stated himself that he was influenced, Brandon, by Spike from Cowboy Bebop. So like, what are your take on that? Like, do you see like the anime influence?
Yeah, because anime, that's a lot of things that people don't get about anime, but part of the artistic value of anime is the hyper feel of it. By hyper, I mean heightened. Everything's kind of over the top. Everything's quippy and fast and giant and bigger than usual and longer and epic. And that's the thing, because it's very much not any kind of Hollywood movie where everything's subdued and smaller and intimate, where anime is heightened and hyper and crazy. But yeah, I get what he's saying is with the character being like hyper smart and everything like that. That's definitely an anime thing, and everything being hyper realistic.
Yeah.
And the two gangs being very over the top, to say the least.
Yeah.
But it's definitely interesting, especially when you mentioned Tug, because when I first met Tug in the movie, who's the big muscle guy, I was just like, what is this? It's the guy who just likes beating people up, and he's wearing a wife.
Tug later.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of those stereotypical angry guys. But you're right, you do get some smaller moments with him that make him a little bit more of a relatable character. And that's the other thing too. You never meet any parents in this movie except for you see the glimpse of Tug's mom, I think.
Right, exactly.
Who's like pouring water or milk for everyone.
Milk. And apple juice. Yeah. Like, she's like, we don't have any orange juice. Yeah. You want apple juice? I don't know. That to me is the scene that always makes me laugh the most.
Sure.
Because it's honestly the first scene in the movie where you're just like, oh, this is a high school like movie. So yeah. But like you're saying, Tug, you get that's the only parent you see in this movie, and no other parents.
But you never meet JGL's parents. You never meet, and I'm like that. It kind of takes away that feel, because it feels like they're dealing with very adult concepts. That if you introduce parents and all this, going like, "What are you doing, son?" Like, it would take you out of the movie, because you'd be like, "Oh, this is weird." But the fact that they don't really introduce parents makes it feel like they're 10 years older, right? They're dealing with real stakes and real issues that are life or death situations, kind of, and they're not just high school
like
kids.
literally murder,
literally life and death. Yeah, like literally two gangs. It's gangs, but it's a lower level of gangs, but it's still gangs.
Right.
Like, they'll still kill you.
Right.
So it's definitely interesting to see that, and especially with the arc at the end of the girl's character. What's her name? Laura. Especially with her character too. You see kind of the purpose of her character, especially towards the end of the movie.
Oh yeah. And that's that great scene, that great monologue at the end, which even to this day, I mean, I was just watching right before we started, and that's one of my favorite like moments just of any movie. And with, you know, and of course introducing characters like Laura and characters like Tug and characters like Penn, you also get the flip side. You know, you kind of mentioned Brain having his own kind of journey through this. Like he's just kind of weaving in the background, but at the end he kind of has the whole thing. It's like, are you not going to tell me what this is all about? Like, did you really put me through all this to, you know? So I thought that was fascinating too. But
yeah, he's great.
Yeah. Like the parents thing is interesting, because I guess I never thought about that. But
that's the first thing I thought about. I was like, where are the parents? And I never met him, and I'm like, oh, okay. I think I get what he was going for, because if I met if I saw JGL's mom or dad going like, "Where have you been, son?" I would have been like, "Oh, this is weird."
Right.
This is weird. You're in high school, bro. What are you doing?
Right.
But the fact that I never saw them made it feel like they were like, "No, this is real. Like we're basically adults, even though we're teenagers. We're dealing with adult type situations and life or death situations."
Even with Emily, who we learn in the beginning is the one who's killed. She has her own story that we become more invested in developing, even without her even being there, right? Like just the narrative that we get from all these different people involved, like, oh wow, she was really damaged, she was really troubled, and you can see how she gets to this point even as a high schooler in the end. So
yeah, and it's also based on like a lot of this movie makes a commentary on who you're surrounding yourself with.
Oh yeah,
your friend groups, your cliques, your the people you choose to trust, kind of thing. So it's very interesting to see like the downfall of Emily was essentially the people that she chose to be friends with, and the group she chose to be friends with.
Yeah, and frankly, this movie came out in 2005, and this was kind of this is maybe a little spoiler territory, but it kind of comments a lot on the idea of teenage pregnancy, right? And especially something in 2005 that was like at the tip of everybody's tongue, especially with that huge spike in teen pregnancies happening in the 90s and the early 2000s. This movie kind of addresses that in a way that's like really weird and strangely touching, but like also like very emotional and like powerful. So, of course that could just be another element incorporating the noir style and fashion of it, but I think it's also is pretty relevant in the sense that it's talking about something like that. So
absolutely. Any last thing you want to say about Brick?
No, I mean like I said in the beginning, it's one of my favorite movies. I actually was introduced to this movie through like watching Chris Stuckman, because I think it's one of his only movies that I gave like an A+ like early on to. So I was like, wow, this must be really cool. Let me check this out, and then I checked it out. It was really awesome.
Cool, man. Awesome. Yeah. Shout out to Chris then.
Yeah.
Let's move on to The Brothers Bloom, which came out
2008.
2008. Thank you, man. I swear I had it ready. No, this one is essentially a studio giving Rian Johnson a budget and giving him a cast and giving him names and actually trusting him to do a bigger movie. It's obviously not a big movie, but it's still like the cast is pretty extraordinary because you have Rachel Weisz, Adrian Brody, Mark Ruffalo, and then my homegirl, straight up, Rinko Kikuchi.
Yeah.
Who I love. I love as soon as she came out in this movie, because again, I haven't seen this movie before. I recently saw it.
Right.
And when I saw her come out, I'm like, yo, that's Rinko. That's freaking from Pacific Rim. Yeah. She's from Kumiko the Treasure Hunter, which I talked about 2 years ago. It's a small indie movie. She's a phenomenal actress that doesn't
Academy Award nominated.
Academy Award. She is phenomenal. Like, she's so good. And most people know her from Pacific Rim, but she's actually like, she's a really freaking good actress in general. And this one's a very interesting movie too, because it's even more so hyper, over the top, kind of winking at the camera a lot. And I didn't expect that from Rian Johnson, because it's two movies that are very much, this one more so, but it's two movies that are very much like over the top and kind of crazy and in your face and not really grounded in reality all the way through. Somewhat grounded, but not all the way. But essentially it's about two kids who grow up as foster kids, and they're two brothers, and they're essentially learn to become con men, and it shows you how they start out as kids, learning how to lie to people to basically get what they want. And especially when they're foster kids, it's something they have to deal with a lot, jumping through different homes and through different parents and stuff like that. So it kind of breaks down the story, and it tells you that they've done this for a while and they learned that that's the only way to live. And then it shows you their adult versions, which is basically Mark Ruffalo and Adrian Brody. And Mark Ruffalo's character is known as
Steven, right?
Steven, who's known as essentially a writer, an artist at creating cons. Yeah, he's an author. The line he says in the movie, he's like, he writes his cons like a Russian literature novelist, with every detail and emotion and character and everything explicitly planned out to the T, that he knows when people, like even at this moment, he knows when people are going to turn, and when they turn, he's ready for the turn because he knows people really, really well. Right. And he always kind of overshadows his brother and puts him in a position of being vulnerable, and his brother is kind of tired of living the lie that of his life. It's his life is an entire lie, and it's never really true. So it's kind of Adrian Brody being kind of tired of going through the cons and going through life as being a liar, and Mark Ruffalo's character kind of writing that through. And their con in this movie deals with mainly Rachel Weisz's character,
right?
Who is a character that is actually is very over the top character.
Yeah.
She's basically insane. She's this crazy eccentric.
Super rich,
epileptic photographer who has seizures every once in a while. Right. So this is obviously a very interesting movie. It's very stylized. It has a lot of funny moments. It has yet a lot of serious moments too. It's not quite a comedy, but it's not quite like a drama either. It's this weird hybrid of a movie. But what do you think about this movie? Because I enjoyed it a lot. I recently saw it.
Yeah, this movie gets a lot of flack. I think it came out pretty early on, before this kind of style movie started catching on a lot, especially in like the 2010s with something like Sherlock Holmes was coming out, and like a lot of these over stylized Edgar Wright was becoming big. So this movie came out kind of before that, so a lot of people didn't really catch on to it. I know it. I mean, I'm gonna address some of the criticisms later that a lot of people have for it, but one of the big criticisms that was aping Wes Anderson style, right? From the very like linear shots to transitions from scenes and all that stuff. But I really enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed it when I first saw it. I caught it on cable like just randomly one afternoon, I guess, and then rewatched it again. And it's like, this is a really funny movie, but it's also really hard. It's a lot of heart in it, I should say. We're dealing with Rachel Weisz's character. She is somebody who's super rich and super privileged, but she has all the money in the world and all the access to information in the world, but she's ultimately just super lonely, right? And I think like exploring that theme of loneliness was really, I mean, you kind of get an idea of it in a comedic way when she has that whole moment of like showing Adrian Brody
her hobbies.
Yeah, her hobbies. Like I collect hobbies because she has nothing else better to do, right?
Yeah. And she literally knows everything because she just reads and learns.
Right.
Because she has all that time.
Yeah, and nobody really to share that time with, right? So that's what really makes it interesting. But I think overall though, the movie really the main theme of the movie I interpret it as is the illusion of cinema in like its own reflexive way. You know what I mean? Like how film is meant to be tricking us and conning us as an audience, hiding and showing specific information when we're supposed to get it and when we're not supposed to get it.
Sure.
I think this movie plays with that a lot, and particularly in where he has this Steven has this great line saying that nothing in life is unwritten. Like how the way that movies manipulate us as viewers and how they manipulate and how storytellers manipulate the lives of their characters is all kind of seen in a lot of different ways. I mean, when you look at something like their first con when Steven is shot by was it Steven or was it Bloom who was shot?
No, it was Bloom who was shot.
Yeah, Bloom who was shot, and then they have like the fake blood and all that, and like when you first see that, it's meant to be like a comedic kind of funny, like they're just counting more people. Yeah. But then when that same element comes up again in like a later moment, not wanting to get into spoiler territory, but that same moment kind of happens again, but like they play it and the way that it's edited and shot and written in the stakes that we come up into that point, we think is real. We're in on the con. We're not like we got conned, and ultimately, it comes off to a big emotional payoff. And then the ending, that's kind of what's great about it, right? The whole rule of comedy is is in threes. Yeah. So the third time that happens at the actual end of the movie is really, really heartbreaking. So again, I think this movie kind of highlights how filmmaking is used to manipulate and con us as audiences. Obviously, this movie has a lot of influences, mostly from movies like The Sting and Dirty Rotten Rascals, in terms of like the heist elements and the con man elements. But it has that very like French and European like new wave style too.
It does,
like that Italian and the French ways of like the camera movements and the quick dialogue and a silent character like Bang Bang and all, like all of those weird little elements really help. But again, that's part of the criticism, right? Like the Wes Anderson. So did you, when you were first introduced to the style of this movie, did you catch on to it
right away, immediately?
Yeah.
Like I was that's one of those things. Because with Brick, it took me a while. I was like, what's going on? But with this one, I was in. I think what helped was the VO. The voiceover,
right.
Yeah, I mean, from the main character, that's kind of it helps because I understand what kind of world they're setting up, and I was like immediately in the world that they were setting up. But yeah, I mean, this movie's obviously I can't talk enough about Rachel Weisz, who I've ranted about in the first when we did Aronofsky and we talked about The Fountain. Rachel Weisz, I can't lie, dude. Watching this movie, and I watch it alone, so I'm allowed to talk to the screen. Yeah, and I'm like, damn, I want to marry that woman, dude. I love Rachel Weisz. She's so cool. But yeah, no, this movie's very interesting because you're right. It does deal with those different types of filmmaking and different inspirations from different types of filmmakers and styles of filmmaking. But I was in with it, man. I was totally in with it. It's definitely, I did see the European vibes for sure. I definitely noticed that for sure. And like you said, the silent character with Bang Bang, Rinko's character in the movie. And I loved her in the movie. I thought she was great.
Hilarious.
She was great, dude. She was so funny. One of my favorite moments in the movie, and I'm not really spoiling anything, is the bicycle scene.
Oh, right.
That's what had me. I literally laughed out loud because the whole idea is that they're gonna get. It's from the first 10 minutes of the movie, but they're gonna get this girl in order to talk to Adrian Brody's character. So his plan is like, let's have her hit him on the bicycle, and then she'll feel bad and then go up to him and take him to the hospital, and then they'll get to know each other. That's kind of the whole bit that they have going on. That's their plan. And basically she hits him in the car, hits him with the car with the bicycle, and then he's all laid on the ground like waiting for her to like help him up. And he's like looking up at his brother, and his brother and Rinko Bang Bang are like giving scores, and they're like, I don't know what's going on, dude. And he's just like, all right, keep going down, pretend to die. And then you see the Lambo just start taking off, and I started laughing so loud. And then it tries backing up, and then she ends up crashing herself.
Yeah, she has like a seizure while she's
driving. And then she crashes. I thought that was hysterical, dude.
Yeah.
And then obviously Mark Ruffalo is like, dude, this is even better, man. You'll get to know her even better. But I thought that was funny, for sure. I also like Rachel Weisz's character. You can never really put your finger on her character at first. Right. Because you're confused by how eccentric she is, because she's very, like you said, over the top and crazy. But it's definitely one of those characters that you kind of feel once you're in the movie. And Adrian Brody, man, I haven't seen Adrian Brody in a minute, obviously. Yeah. Because this is when Adrian Brody was like in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he was like in King Kong and like a lot of stuff.
He was in Predators. He was in a ton of movies. Right. Obviously when he played the pianist.
The pianist.
Piano. I don't know.
Because the piano is the one with Anna Paquin.
Yeah, I forget. Anyways, Adrian Brody, he's a good actor. Yeah. I forget about him. Anyways, Adrian Brody plays a very compelling kind of like you feel for him type character. Yeah. Whereas Mark Ruffalo is very much, and it's funny because I feel like they aged Mark Ruffalo a little bit more. They aged him up a little bit, make him subtle ways.
Yeah, I think that's really, they wanted to give him the older brother feel. Yeah.
Because if you put him side by side, if I said who's older, I'd be like, but they aged him up a tad with little details, and his beard had a little bit of gray in it.
Right. Well, I think especially, I think that really adds to the idea of Adrian Brody's character needing to develop his own life. He's lived under the thumb of his older brother his whole life, so he needs to be the one who. He needs to be the one who conquers and eventually releases and frees himself from like the authority of his older brother. Sure. So I think having that dynamic there from the very start, even when we meet him as kids, you always kind of tell like the older one has more of the power over him just because he's older. And seeing Adrian Brody's character, I forget, they just call him Bloom in this movie, right?
Sure, yeah.
And the other one's called Steven. So whenever we see Bloom, having those moments of self-reflection, and Steven keep trying to tear him down, like, oh, you don't really want to quit, you don't really want to give up. It really adds to like the whole idea of maturing and growing up on your own. Sure. So it's really nice.
Also, I really like the moment between Rachel Weisz and Adrian Brody when they're talking about her life, and when he asks her if he feels her life was like, like she felt cheated out of her life because she had to take care of her mom and stay indoors the whole time, but never really got to socialize because she doesn't have she has an inability to have a social life is basically what it is. And she says no because I basically told myself that I'm having such a great time, or I told myself that I'm gonna give the life I want for myself, and I basically convinced myself. I basically tricked my brain into thinking that this is what I want. And it's an interesting thing that they said that about her character, the fact that she's able to convince herself that this is the life that she wants.
Right.
Kind of with like Adrian Brody's character, where he's just obsessed with getting out of that lifestyle, but he's still in it throughout the whole thing. Right. And the fact that they're able to, the fact that he wants an unwritten life, the fact that he wants a life away from the con is still a con in itself, right. kind of thing, where he's writing himself out of the story, but he's still in the story as himself. Right. It's this weird little thing they do at the end. You know what I'm talking about because you've seen it. If you see the movie, you'll get it. But it's one of those things where I thought that was very interesting, how the way he's able to write himself, but it's still part of himself. Because at the end, he says the best con, the perfect con, is when everyone gets what they want. And that's essentially what happens at the end of the movie, where they complete the perfect con, and the perfect con might not be what he thought he wanted, but it is what he wanted in the end. Right, so it's a very, it has a lot of layers, this movie, and I think it doesn't get enough credit that it deserves.
I know one of the other criticisms, going back to Rachel Weisz's character, one of the biggest criticisms is also the idea of her being like the manic pixie dream girl, right? Like her just being there to kind of serve as the adventurous spirit to free the life of Adrian Brody. The beautiful, dreamy, rich girl that could finally let this man live or whatever, Sure. I mean, do you kind of think, that was coming across in this?
Sure, but I think they address it. I think they literally say that in the movie, in the beginning of the movie when you meet her. As far as like, oh, you got a pretty, beautiful girl who's going to, trick me into this and that. And that's kind of the whole... The fact that they're able to talk about it initially, I think, is essentially what they were going for. So I think it's fine. I think it works.
I think the exact same way, and I think that's even added by the fact that for the whole movie, she's basically like her own person. Like she has her own agenda. Like even as many times as Steven or Bloom try to talk her out of something, whether that be in the sense of the con or whether that be like in the actual situation, she's not really listening. She's going to go her own way. So I think, is she kind of the dream girl that, that he kind of wants and needs? Yeah. But she does live by her own thing. And, in the end, that leads to her being manipulated in many ways. But that manipulation comes at her own agency. So she's actually the one who drives a lot of the story. And I think that's what's really fascinating is that, and it's kind of comparing this to Inception and it's really comparing this movie to Inception. But like the idea of Inception is letting, the way you convince somebody to do something is make them think that it's their own idea.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and here a lot of the times they just let her run wild and think that this is her adventure, this is her story. They're just writing it. You know what I mean? So I think that's really where it comes down to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Any last words on?
I mean, this movie, it got a 66% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, 6.8 on IMDb. So it's not really, it doesn't really have the greatest reviews, but I think over time a lot of people have come to appreciate this, especially seeing the rest of Rian Johnson's work. Whether that be in Looper and now The Last Jedi. But I think the theme of the movie is pretty perfectly summed up in like one quote where Rachel Weisz's character says, a picture is a secret about a secret. The more it tells, the less you know. You know what I mean? I think this movie does a lot of not telling us things, and like I said in the beginning, manipulating the audience and the language in which we understand film to manipulate us as an audience. And they have the motif of the card tricks like throughout, and that's kind of the same thing with card tricks, right? Making you look at one thing and
it's misdirection.
Exactly. Misdirection. I think this movie does that a lot in a very cool and interesting way.
It's very interesting. Obviously, this is getting into a weird, deeper level, but it's also the definition of how you put yourself, when you put yourself out there as a person, you kind of put up a front as well. Like in real life, I'm saying like most people aren't 100% fully transparently authentic because They're afraid of the judgment they will receive. So people always put up a front when it comes to the social front, right? You always put your best foot forward, basically. And it's the idea of like, when does putting up that front eventually you trick yourself into becoming the character that you basically wrote yourself to be, right? Where it's like, I have to be a certain way because people have a certain idea of me and who I am and the character I play, right? In real life, when I socialize with people. And then when I come back to it, I'm so used to the cyclical manner of which I convince myself of who I am, this character, that I start to become that character, right? Or I start to lose myself and forget who I am. It can be good, it could be bad. It could be, most of the time it's not good because you're not yourself. But it's a very interesting point because especially in Hollywood, I mean, we see that in Hollywood at a 10, bro, right? Because because yourself is your product. You are, especially when it comes to actors, but even directors, even nowadays, even producers, anyone who's working in the industry, you yourself are your own product.
Yeah, your image is almost just as important as...
Exactly. Your image is your career. Your the idea that people have of you is essentially what you're selling, right? I loved how I saw the interview with it's a Variety talk that I've mentioned before, but Variety does Actors on Actors, and it was the Hugh Jackman and Willem Dafoe one. And I love how Hugh Jackman said that, like, at the beginning of my career, my small business was me. That was my small business, and I was a small businessman trying to sell me. I'm an entrepreneur trying to sell me. It's such a weird thing, but it's so true because that's why so many people have that unauthentic feel of Hollywood, because it's not really authentic. You're a character. You're playing a certain thing that people think they want to see when they see Hugh Jackman, or they want to see when they see whoever. And it's a very interesting thing that this movie deals with as well, as far as playing that character and pretending to be someone that you might not be, because that's what the idea that people have of you.
So
that's very interesting as well.
Right.
Any last things?
No, that's it for me.
My last thing is shout out to Rinko again. I freaking love her. I love her introduction in the bar scene. Also the JGL cameo. Did you see that?
Yeah. Again, all of his movies,
because there's this tracking shot and I'm like, that's JGL. Yeah. And he's wearing like a stub beard thing that he's got going on. But the introduction to me to Bang Bang, I love when Mark Ruffalo was talking about her and it's like, who's this girl? Blah blah blah. She doesn't talk. She's from Japan, but blah blah blah. And he's like, yeah, you know, she's like our fifth Beatle. He says, and she's awesome, and you know, she does all this and does all that. And then the guy at the bar is hitting on her by saying, hey, do you like anime? And I just laughed. But anyways, I love the shot where Mark Ruffalo goes like this and goes bang, and then she goes like this, like that, and then it goes back and it hits the light bulb behind her. That's such a cool shot because it actually looks like she's shooting her, and she goes like that. And I was like, that's a cool little detail that Rian Johnson has to make you on board for her character. You're immediately like, I like that girl. Immediately, I was just like, dude, I love her. She's great. Just because of a little detail that they put in there. So I thought that was awesome. All right, now we are moving on to the film that he has, which is known as Looper. Which came out in 2012. Now, like you mentioned before that Chris Stuckman was the one that got you to watch Brick. This one, 2012, it was Christian Harloff and the Schmoes who got me to watch Looper.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I obviously didn't see it in theaters, didn't see it anytime else, but when they regarded it as like one of their favorite films or whatever, I specifically remember Christian saying that he loved this movie and that everyone needs to see it. I remember legitimately being like, okay, and then going out to rent the movie and actually watch it. But this was a movie obviously starring JGL again. And this one got a little bit more attention for Rian Johnson now, right?
Yeah,
because now he's got Bruce Willis, and Bruce Willis is, no matter what, he's going to be a big name, and it's sold to you as an action movie, a time travel action movie. So getting Bruce Willis, who's basically an action star, kind of convinced an audience to go check it out a little bit more. And it's interestingly, like, it's regarded as a great film, and yet it has a lot of debates, at least with me and my friends, because I debate this movie a lot, especially when it comes to time travel, because I'm like a time travel, like, geek, like, nerd. I love time travel, and I love the aspects of it, and different shows and different movies that talk about time travel. And this one has their own interpretation of time travel. But essentially, it's about future. I think it's 2024.
2044.
2044.
The Joseph Gordon-Levitt storyline 2044, and then the Bruce Willis storyline is 2074.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But basically it's a future where time travel hasn't been created in that time, but it has been created in the future. And essentially it's assassins. And the premise is so crazy to me that I struggle to get into it because I'm like, it's assassins that basically kill people for a living. But the way they kill people is that the people in the future send him back in time. Then they take him out. And then that person in the future doesn't exist anymore because guess what? They were sent back in time, so they literally don't exist.
Yeah. Plus, they dispose of the bodies in the past, so the materials of the body will never reminisce in the future.
And then eventually, part of the contract you sign as one of these assassins or one of these loopers, is what they're called in the movie, is that you sign a contract saying, I'm going to be doing this for a while, kill, until eventually I kill myself, my older self in the future, from the future. Sent to the past, I kill myself, and then I'm set. And then, but basically, you're signing a contract saying 30 years from now, I'm allowing you to take me and kill me. Right. And I'm like, what? Why would you sign that, though?
Not a very forward-thinking.
That's what he says in the movie. He said the job doesn't attract forward-thinking people. Yeah. And I was like, that's. I'm glad you said that, because why would you sign a contract that says, you know what, I'm going to kill myself in the future, but for now, I'm going to do lots of drugs. And it's like, so? You're still going to die? Yeah. I can't see myself ever, like, no matter how old I am, being willing to be, like, dragged out of my home and shot by myself. Yeah. Like, you're going to go shoot yourself now. What? Yeah. But basically, that's the premise of the story. And it's Bruce Willis playing the older version of Joseph Gordon-Levitt, or vice versa. And then he gets sent back in time to kill him, and he's unable to kill him because Bruce Willis is such a badass that he can't kill him. And then he's chasing him down throughout the whole movie, and Bruce Willis is obsessed with killing this crazy gang leader, like almost world leader at this point, called the Rainmaker, who's in the past. So he's going to the past not only to stop himself from killing himself, but to stop the Rainmaker from being this crazy, all-powerful, gangster who's killing everyone in the future.
And the Rainmaker is the one, in the beginning of the movie, we see a lot of the loopers are starting to close their own loops.
Correct, yeah.
And then the Rainmaker is the one who's making that decision, because we see Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, Seth, played by Paul Dano. He comes in, and he's like, dude, they're closing my loop. This is like the 5th loop in like 4 weeks or something like that. So we start to wondering, like, damn, what? And of course, we expect Joseph Gordon-Levitt's old Joe to come back and have that interaction. But when he comes back and there's no bag on his head and it's just Bruce Willis just sitting there and he looks him right in the eyes, like, what else is Joseph Gordon-Levitt supposed to do, right?
Yeah, because when he has a bag on his head, it's easy to just be and shoot him, right?
Right.
But when it's like you see, you're like, oh shoot, that's me. Yeah. That's weird. This is weird. Like, I would hesitate too, because I'd be like, yo, that's me though. This is really weird. So yeah, definitely, that's an interesting point for sure. And it's also the concept of, here we go again, killing baby Hitler. Right. Killing a guy who is supposed to make atrocities when they're younger. If you know someone is going to be a crazy killer in the future, do you go in the past and kill them? That's essentially what Bruce Willis is trying to do by killing someone he knows is a kid in the past. So he's basically killing kids in this movie. Yeah. And they tell you he's killing kids because he's narrowed it down to three kids. Yeah. And he's visiting each house. And basically, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is in the Lost House protecting the kid and also waiting for Bruce Willis so he can shoot Bruce Willis too, right? But then another aspect of this film that I think is so interesting, and then again, I'm going deep nerd to you. My favorite, every time someone asks me, what superpower would you have if you could have one superpower? Every time someone asks me, my favorite X-Men, Jean Grey, when it comes down to something known as telekinesis, I am obsessed with telekinesis, which is why I'll get into Last Jedi shit too, because Last Jedi talks about the Force and telekinesis stuff, and I'm like, hell yeah. I love it because I love telekinesis. And this movie essentially talks about that too. How does one man take over the world? Telekinesis, bro.
Well, he seems to be a second generation because when Joe is explaining how the world works and how there's 10% of the population is,
and it's really basic telekinesis.
Yeah, they
like
could just
floating
like
a quarter
coins, or like lighters or
book.
something. Yeah. So like, but this kind of genetics just kind of just popped up out of nowhere. But what we see in the Rainmaker is kind of one of the first examples, I guess, of a second generation TK, because he obviously his mother is one who we meet, Emily Blunt, in this movie. Really one of the first times I've ever seen Emily Blunt in anything.
Oh yeah, this is another thing that showed you Emily Blunt is a phenomenal actress. Like, she's crazy good, right? So you're right. She's another one who I forget is like regarded as an amazing actress now.
Yeah, and then but yeah, her part in the movie is that she's the mother of this future Rainmaker, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe that's a spoiler. Whatever. We could. I mean,
it's not really. It's in the first like 20-some minutes of the movie. They tell you.
Yeah.
So I don't think that is.
I mean, I think enough people have seen Looper too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not a spoiler.
Yeah.
Plus, I already said that he's going back in time to kill a guy who.
Yeah. So anyway, we understand that, we understand what's at odds. We understand the stakes. I think this movie, I mean, to me, is one of my favorite science fiction movies of all time. And I remember watching this initially in theaters and just kind of being like, I don't really like this. You know what I mean? Like, because when you watch it, you kind of have like this shock of you experiencing and going with this one story for the majority of the time, and then just kind of hanging out on the farm for the rest of the movie.
Sure. And you also, I'm going to let you finish, but you also don't really know which Bruce Willis to root for, which Joe to root for. Because at one point, I'm like, oh, Bruce Willis is the good guy because he's trying to fight for his love, his wife, and his family, and trying to take out the gangsters. And then and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's working for the gangsters. And then you're like, wait, what if Joseph Gordon-Levitt's the good guy? And Bruce, and it's always like, who's right, who's wrong? Right. I don't know.
Right. It's the only sci-fi movie that ask the question, what if you're, a lot of times with sci-fi or with time travel in particular, it's like, who is the cause and who is the effect? This movie is the first time that it's like, what if you're the cause and the effect, right? What if you're the one who's actually responsible for creating the monster that you want to destroy? And I think that's really what's interesting about this movie. That's what really hooks a lot of people in as one of the best sci-fi movies. And I think one of the ways it tackles the time travel. I mean, a lot of people, kind of say sci-fi, the time travel doesn't make sense. You can make an argument for.
That's what my buddy, he argues to the death. That it makes no sense.
Well, it's, when they were doing this movie, they obviously brought in Shane Carruth, who Shane Carruth is the guy who directed Primer, which is regarded as probably the best time travel movie maybe of all time by a lot of people. So he, Shane Carruth, or if not the best, the most complicated time travel movie, right? Shane Carruth, Primer, and an Upstream Color in 2013. But, Rian Johnson had him, look at the script and kind of consult with the time traveling elements in this movie. And ultimately, I think where they landed on, at least according to the director's commentary, is that the time travel rules in this movie are similar to that of the Terminator, right? So if you're in one timeline, if you're in another timeline, but you time travel back to your timeline and you start to change that, you're in one particular timeline. So, and the fact that when something happens to Joseph Gordon-Levitt, like he cuts himself, it'll come up on older Bruce Willis because in that timeline that happened, even though his memories are from another timeline. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a little tricky, but like I think ultimately they found
it's definitely a little tricky. Keep going.
Yeah. Well, they found their set of rules and they're mostly staying consistent with it. But it's the same idea of the Terminator. There's the rules they're going off of Kyle Reese being sent back into the past of a timeline that he's not in, but the timeline that he alters is ultimately the timeline that we're going to see in the future. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So yeah, I think that's where it really lands. I love this movie. And ultimately, like Bruce Willis says in the movie, if we're going to be talking about time travel all day, we're going to talk about time travel.
They talk to the audience a lot in this movie.
Yeah.
where the audience, every time they're like, all right, let's explain this, and Bruce Willis is like, let's not.
Yeah. He literally screams, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And he basically is looking at the camera and being like, don't try to figure this out, because it's not worth it. It's time travel, so shut up. Like, there's multiple times in this movie where they're actually telling the audience that, which is kind of funny, because they literally tell you, hey, stop. Time travel's crazy. Just let's not think about it.
Yeah.
But it's definitely one of those things where explaining their own rules and the rules they're dealing with, and the topic of your physical self versus your mental self versus where you are cognizant of a certain future and cognizant of a certain path. It's kind of like Flashpoint too, to be honest. Flashpoint is obviously a DC animated movie where they talk about that. You've seen Flashpoint, right?
Yeah.
But Barry Allen mentions that, where he talks about the different timelines and how one certain thing changes another, and he starts to lose memories of another thing while he gains memories of the current timeline.
Right.
It's crazy. Time travel's crazy, but I obsessed with it because I love it. But yeah, this movie does deal with those concepts, specifically the concepts of, and again, when it comes to spoil, we're not spoiling, we're just talking about the premise of the movie and essentially what the movie's about. But when it comes to the idea of killing someone who is going to commit atrocities versus you attempting to kill that person is what set them on the path to kill you.
Right. It's the cause and the effect.
The cause and the effect,
yeah,
exactly.
He's at the center of that.
That's essentially what it's about in the movie, and I thought that was such an interesting point because I didn't get that till the end. But at the end is essentially when you obviously get it because they tell you. Versus the older Bruce Willis, trying to kill that kid, turning that kid into eventually what he is, or is it the idea of the kid not being raised by his mother, versus if he had his mother, he might have not been the monster that he becomes, kind of thing,
right. I mean, it deals with a lot of interesting ideas of, again, and this is coming from another look at the future, like, economy, right? I mean, a lot of what this movie's about is like globalization and capitalism nature that kind of leads to these like dirty, grimy consequences for a lot of these people, right? I mean, the Joe character, he lives in the city. He's surrounded by like dirt and like filthy people, and it's a neo-noir, right? That's what a lot of people categorize this movie as, a sci-fi neo-noir. And actually, funny enough, this is the movie when I saw it. I didn't really love it, but I was interested in this idea of, what is neo-noir? What is this? So I kind of started to look into that stuff, and that's ultimately what became my favorite genre. But yeah, this movie, in dealing with the ideas of like Chinese money, like the Arabic watch that he carries, like how global the world is supposed to be now, I think that's really what plays another role into what makes the Rainmaker such a powerful figure, because he's able to sweep into the mob and take over because this is so widespread all around. So
it's very interesting too, and it talks about the evolution of each country, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like where you think one country will be in the future versus what eventually becomes of that country.
Right.
Specifically with China and specifically with France, right? Because he's trying to learn French because he's obsessed with France. But in the future, France is going to be whatever versus China is going to be popping in the future, right? So he's like, why don't you learn Mandarin? Because China is going to be popping in the future.
Yeah.
Right now it sucks, but trust me, in the future, China's going to be lit. It's going to be crazy.
You know what's funny about that too? The movie was actually supposed to be set in France or in Paris when he goes into the future. They just didn't have enough money to shoot in Paris. So then, but because the movie was Chinese financed, the financiers just like, why don't you just shoot here? We'll cover the cost of that. And ultimately, I think that's what made the movie as successful as it was, because it did big numbers in China. When it came out, it did really big numbers in China.
That's crazy.
Yeah, even though it's like only a couple scenes that's set in Shanghai. But, it did good numbers in China, and that's part of it again, like the globalization aspect of it. He has the Chinese watch, the Arabic watch. He has the tattoo. The tattoo. That's and again, he's learning French because. And I think in the next 30 years, the whole idea of like this English and an American-centric economy is going to be kind of evaporated.
We're in the middle of that right now, right? Especially with the president of China and Trump.
Yeah.
Kind of dealing with their own things and doing side things, and the fact that China is progressively getting better, not just economically, but with they're experts in the online world and the computer world. And that's obviously something else with Russia too. But with China, I mean, you see it in Mr. Robot, dude. When they talk about China and Mr. Robot, it's so true.
Right.
Like imagine every hacker we have here, imagine that times 10 in China. It's crazy. Like the knowledge they have on computers and about influence it's crazy. Like they're next level. China is such an interesting country, because I was thinking about this the other day, because thinking about Lonzo Ball and thinking about China and all that stuff, because I was thinking about it watching SportsCenter, because we were talking about China playing basketball in China. I have a friend of mine, A friend of mine plays professional basketball in China.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is a little side note, but it's one of those things where the Chinese market for basketball is growing and growing. One of my friends plays basketball in China. Another one of my friends coaches basketball in China.
Really?
Because they played here. The friend who's playing ball in China played here on a smaller school level.
Mm-hmm.
He played at a Florida International something, Florida FSU or not FSU. I'm sorry, FIU. I think it's what it.
Okay.
But basically, the idea of taking your knowledge and taking your talents to a different growing market in China, and the idea also of the way that China isn't as progressive as probably Japan is. At the same time, when it comes to human rights, when it comes to laws, it's so crazy how China is so obsessively capitalist while at the same time being so obsessively not capitalist and communist kind of. It's a weird mix of what the society is, because it's not quite the brainwashed society of North Korea at all.
Definitely not.
It's definitely not. But at the same time,
there's a lot of communist ideas.
There's a lot of communist government plants that they put specifically with a capitalistic overtone over it. It's crazy. Like the stuff that's going on there, and the fact that my friend lives there is a very interesting thing for sure. But I just love how the idea of like the future, what the future is going to be, and what markets are going to grow and what markets are going to stay stagnant kind of thing.
Right.
And they deal with that in this movie when he's learning French when instead he should be learning in a different language.
Right. And, this movie has a lot of great messages as well. I mean, obviously when we get the introduction of Joe through the lens of Jeff Daniels' character, when he's talking about him, he kind of says, like, when we found you, you're just a kid with, like, slick hair and, like, running the block, basically, just doing crime and doing whatever. But then after he gets his loop, as we see in that timeline where he does actually kill his own loop, he basically recruits back to what he was when he was younger, right? His hair comes back down. He's just committing random crimes, robbing people, killing people, and ultimately just to feed his drug addiction, right? I think that's another thing this movie touches on is really heavily is the usage of drugs and how that can influence and corrupt some people who might have not otherwise, but then
how that's essentially throwing your life away. They say that a lot in this movie. I totally mentioned that.
But then they also have that great moment where he's talking with Emily Blunt about like how his mother was on drugs, and he always, or not with Emily Blunt, I think it was the kid. He was like, he always thought his mother was just so stupid for being on drugs, but like ultimately she was coping with the pain that she was feeling, and he's doing that too whenever he's on that. And it's kind of weird seeing, not weird, but it's fascinating how this movie positions the use of drugs, particularly when most of these kids are like losing or like are closing their own loops, and then their solution is to celebrate and get as high as possible, like, and just like, I guess, enjoy the rest of their life, just throw the rest of it away.
But it's also the idea of being how your future is dictated by your past. But your obsession with drugs specifically, right? Where it's like I'm hooked on drugs in such a way that I'm basically throwing away my future, where I basically don't have a future, where I'm basically just an emptyless junkie who's just looking for the next hit, right? That's such a crazy, not crazy, but it's such an interesting concept, the way he chooses to identify drugs as the same thing as throwing your life away.
Right. Well, it's the idea of self-obsession. And I think that's the theme in all of Johnson's movies, whether that, especially in Brothers Bloom, with the idea of the con men, right? Conning people out of just thinking selfishly. And we'll see that in The Last Jedi as well. But self-obsession is when we see it in this movie, it comes in the form of younger Joe through his abuse of drugs and how he's just not caring about anything and just living his life vicariously and whatnot, like hooking up with strippers and stuff. But his older Joe, his self-obsession is killing these kids, is finding the Rainmaker and avenging his wife, essentially, who dies at the hands of the Rainmaker. And by the way, that whole sequence when we see like from year 1 to year 30 and how the Joseph Gordon-Levitt character develops into the Bruce Willis thing, that's brilliant, man. I gotta tell you, Rian Johnson's like the king of montage, dog.
And the fact that it's mostly silent too.
Yeah, like no dialogue. It's just all these like different locations, different spots, like times where you think that's a big budget action sequence in itself, it just flashes to it and just keeps it moving, right? Like these are big story points that they kind of highlight. I think Johnson does that throughout all of his movies. Like every single use of montage in his films are just really bright and vivid and feel really nice and natural, but in carrying the story along, but also very stylized, and you get a clear understanding of what's happening. So again, this is, Looper is something that really has has affected a lot of people. Did really well critically, made a lot of top 10 lists. I remember there was even some stuff about it getting nominated for the screen. I think it got nominated for the WGA original screenplay.
Oh, really?
I think.
I didn't know that.
I don't think it got. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't know if it. I know there was a lot of talk about it getting in the Oscar nomination for Best Original Screenplay too. But like I said initially, and watching this movie, the whole stuff, the whole second half being set in a barn, was really off-putting initially. But then revisiting that, you get a lot of the idea of, we've lived in the city life for long enough, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character has lived in the city life, pretty much all of his life. Now that he has to be forced into hanging out with this family and just kind of being recluded from the rest of the world, that's beginning his process of cleansing himself. Then he starts to go through withdrawals and starts to kick his drug habits. I think that's just really great, man. I think the way they handle that, and obviously there's life and death situations and stakes on the edge, but
sure,
at the end of the day, he's able to clean himself up in that way. So I don't know. I thought, what are your thoughts on like the way the pacing of this movie goes, right?
The pacing's phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's great. I think it deals with those things very interestingly. And the fact that it makes both sides of the character very compelling, and you kind of root for both sides. That's my thing. Like, I really was rooting for older Bruce Willis the vast majority of the movie when I was first seeing the movie, right? I was like, yeah, dude, like, go save your wife and freaking kill the freaking Hitler kid. Right. But at the same time, eventually I found out, like, ooh, he's killing kids. It's not cool.
Yeah.
And then eventually I was like, all right, I see what they're doing. The fact that in order to stop a monster, you become the monster that you initially were trying to stop. Like, that's deep in itself, right? And it's also the concept of a kid, it's like childhood, right? How much childhood can dictate who you are, how much the innocence of a child experiencing certain trauma can stay with them their entire life, to the point that they're inflicting so much pain on people in the present, right? Where it's like the idea of an innocent child is so pure and so innocent, corrupting that child at a very young age and making him feel the real world at a young age,
right,
is damaging. It's detrimental to who they are as a person and who they become as a person. And that's why so many parents, like in real life, are obsessed with keeping their children safe, keeping them protected, keeping them from watching certain things, from speaking certain ways, because they want them to experience their childhood in the purest manner they can, so that when they get into the real world, whether that be high school, whether that be college, whether that be their first job, they now know what it's like to have a childhood that was very much fulfilling, right? That's why as a parent, like, I'm not a parent, but as parents, I didn't realize, man, especially living with my brother, and he has a ton of kids, I didn't realize how much being a parent really meant you kind of don't have a life. And I don't want to say that in a bad way, but in the sense that you're giving up certain things that you like and certain things you want to do, and you're giving all that up for your kid. You want your kid to have moments and to have memories of certain things, and you're working your way to build those memories, and you find satisfaction in the memories and in the joy of your kid in order for their life to be a success. But you as a parent, you're basically just living for them, right? That's a lot of what it is, especially as a child, right? Obviously when they get older, it becomes different, but
yeah,
it's so interesting that the way they dive into that, because they're talking about the way Emily Blunt's trying so hard to give this kid peace, and where if you don't give him peace, the potential he has to make damaging effects.
Yeah, become the rainmaker.
And become the rainmaker.
Yeah, but again, you touch on a great thing, because she says, what if she raised him good? What if he's able to have a good childhood, have a good life, and ultimately be the one who and ultimately use those powers that he has, those incredible powers, for something good and for the great, and for the good of the people.
Yeah.
So, and now that we have the one scenario where we see the bad version of this happen. Now seeing that Emily Blunt actually is able to provide for a kid, where would that result in? That's the ultimate question that young Joe has to ask, right? And protecting, because once he realizes that he's the Rainmaker, he almost wants to kill the kid too. like seeing how much power he has. In that great scene with Ty Barishaw, right? The guy from Modern Family.
Oh shoot!
Yeah. When he comes in and the kid just like explodes him with like that cloud of blood, and it's shoot, what is this?
Telekinesis is what it is, bro. No, but it's dealing with the concept of one of my favorite shows in the past, Smallville. Did you ever see Smallville?
Yeah, I've seen it a little. I haven't seen
Smallville. The whole premise of 10 seasons, right? It's a 10-season show, but the whole premise of it is essentially coming down to Clark's parents, Jonathan and Martha. This show is basically about Jonathan and Martha versus Lionel, which is Lionel Luthor.
Right.
What would happen in a different universe if Clark was raised by Lex Luthor's family?
Right.
And the fact that Lex Luthor is a product of his parents, is specifically his dad, who's a very vicious businessman, and he's very, strong-headed and vicious and cold-hearted, and very goal-oriented and obsessive. What would happen if Clark, Superman, was raised by the parents of Lex Luthor, Lionel Luthor, right?
Right.
And essentially it shows that he becomes bitter, he becomes cold, he becomes conniving, versus being raised by the Kents, who are very peaceful, who are very loving, who are very conservative, who are very, like, all these different ideals that are placed into the upbringing of someone who has potential world universe changing power, like a Superman, right? Because that guy's the most powerful guy in the universe. What do you do with someone who has so much power? Raising them, the responsibility it is. Same with freaking Rainmaker kid. His crazy telekinetic powers. He has the potential of blowing up the planet. He has the potential of saving the planet, right? What is the upbringing of that kid that can change it?
Right. No, this movie deals with some of the biggest questions, I think. The sci-fi movie of this budget, I mean, I think the budget was like $60 million or something like that. Great budget, for a contained science fiction. By the way, we talked about the Jeff Daniels bad guy a little bit. I can't remember his name. Abe is his name. But even his henchman, henchman, another henchman who has his own arc, right?
Sure.
He is a dude who just wants to be accepted by the authority. He wants to see his own, he wants to be appreciated. He wants to be valued for things he does, and he's just trying so hard throughout the entire movie, even after even when he doesn't have to be. So I think that's really, really great. And
the fact that Abe, Jeff Daniels' character, calls him cowboy. He's like, all right, cowboy.
Yeah,
think you're cool, cowboy.
And how his gun is just like the ultimate antithesis of like his manlyhood. Like,
sure.
Again, that's something we see in like other that's something that is a trope. That was like a trope in like the 1970s and 80s.
Overcompensation.
Especially with the gun, right?
Sure.
That's Dirty Harry. That's everything. So he was probably raised on those ideals. And that's something that carried on into him. So when he gets his gap taken away and Jeff Daniels takes away, he just feels like a little boy again. And I think that's really fascinating how he has that arc to him too.
And the fact that Jeff Daniels kind of comments, he's like, all those movies that you guys are dressing up like are all movies copying other movies.
Exactly.
Another commentary towards the movie itself.
Right.
I thought that was kind of funny. He's like, those movies are just copying other movies that copied other movies.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right. I see what you're saying, Looper. Right. I see what you're saying, Ryan. I see it.
No, it's really smart in that way. And I think that having all of those, especially, it has a lot of intertextual kind of references too, right? Particularly in his use of time travel, kind of relating back to like the Terry Gilliam's, like the 12 Monkeys, right? Something else that Bruce Willis is in. But that kind of notion of time travel being somebody who's stuck in between time and not really sure, like kind of seeing your own death is something that kind of reminisces throughout this film too.
Sure.
So again, a lot of great themes. I kind of almost wonder, there's that one big action sequence that Bruce Willis has. I almost kind of wonder if Bruce was like, all right, I'm going to sign on to this movie. but I need an action scene. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't think it was even Bruce. I think it was like the studio. If Bruce doesn't kill at least 40 people, this ain't worth it.
Yeah,
It could have been part of the deal.
That's the genius.
I love that scene though.
Yeah, it is a great scene. And genius of Rian Johnson, man. Who else could get fucking Bruce Willis to wake up? You know what I mean?
Like, no, for real, dude. Like you hear stories about Bruce being like the most like who gives a crap kind of guy and who doesn't do anything, but it's true.
Yeah.
Like that fool will not put any effort into anything. He's crazy. Bruce Willis is insane.
He was acting his ass off in this movie though.
Yeah, he was. It was really good, dude.
Yeah.
But I think he was just happy just holding a gun and shooting people.
Yeah. Joseph Gordon-Levitt with the prosthetic nose. I know that's a criticism for a lot of people.
It took people out of the movie. Yeah. It didn't take me out at all.
Well, I think it helped connect the Bruce Willis appearance, right? That's what it's supposed to do. But to me, it felt like, oh, this kid would be a young Bruce Willis if, you know, it wasn't distracting to me at least. Like I thought it was really.
It wasn't to me either.
Yeah,
I think JGL gave a good performance.
Oh yeah, and he really nailed the mannerisms, like the little eye twitch that Bruce Willis had, like when he was younger and stuff like that.
Also the fact that I know this might be a stupid comment, but the fact, dude. That scene where he's like eating cereal and he's like in a wife beater or something. He's so skinny in this movie.
Oh yeah,
like George. I think he talked about it in a different interview, but he talked about losing weight for this movie. And I'm like, damn, dude, you got skinny.
Yeah,
like so skinny.
Well, he's playing that junkie role, right?
Yeah,
that's what he's supposed to do.
And he talked about losing like I forget how much it was, like 20, 30 pounds for this movie. And like it's JGL. It's not like a fat guy. It's a skinny dude naturally. But the fact that he got so skinny for this movie is crazy. It's a testament to him. Last thing I'll say about Looper is. I think he says this in the diner, but he says, "Why don't you do what old men do and die?" I was like, "That's a great line. That's a great freaking line." It's probably my favorite line of the movie. And I'm like, "You gotta say that. Like, even if that wasn't in the script, I hope they just added that in because that's such a true thing."
That's so funny that he's like actually talking to himself when he says that too.
Like, you're old, die, dude. Shit. It's like, but I'm you, man. I don't care. You're old. Ew, gross. But what's the last thing you want to say on this?
This is one of my favorite science fiction movies. You know, again, it's the idea of neo-noir, especially the stuff that's set in the city it's kind of, you know, to me it feels like the sequel that should have been to Blade Runner. You know, that's just me.
You mean the greatness of Blade Runner 2049? What?
Let's not get too carried away.
All right.
Again, I like Blade Runner 2049. I just don't love it. This movie kind of and it takes a lot of visual aesthetic from Blade Runner too.
It does.
Or from Ridley Scott in general, right? From the production design to the cinematography and whatnot. But it's his very own distinctive style, and you know, you kind of alluded to it before, but this is a much grittier kind of style that Rian Johnson's working in. There's still some over the top elements, of course,
sure, and
there's still some key visual moments. I know, like the whole idea of like the cloudiness and the fog is like a big visual motif, right? From like the creamer in his coffee to like the blood that splatters out of that guy, and even, you know, from the smoke that he's just smoking, you know, the cigarettes or the incense or whatever. And when he gets high, like his eyes even get like super cloudy in the pupil. Yeah, that's a little detail I just noticed when I was rewatching it. But again, that's a part of the visual style and feel of this movie. And ultimately, this is, like I said, one of my favorites, and I think that over time, this movie has garnered and will continue to garner a bigger and bigger following. So,
sure, especially when more people check it out.
Yeah, definitely, and even you know when smaller directors go on to direct big things like Star Wars, a lot of people go to revisit their older filmographies.
Absolutely,
and I think a lot of people are revisiting. I know a lot of people who hadn't seen Looper before The Last Jedi, but wanted to check that out just to see what the style was going to be like going forward. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And we're gonna talk about the Breaking Bad episodes too.
No, we usually just do film.
Yeah.
But you mention The Fly if you want.
Oh, it's my favorite episode of Breaking Bad ever.
I can't lie. Yeah. When I first saw The Fly, I'll mention it. Right, we won't go into it. But when I first saw that episode, watching it, like I was binging Breaking Bad because I was a little bit behind on it.
Right.
I was freaking out. I was freaking out. I was like, what's going on? This can't be the whole episode. And then commercial break come back from commercial break. What? They're still looking for the fly. What is going? Like I remember it was literally like me having a freak out moment watching this episode, The Fly, where I was like, all right, one more commercial break, then we're gonna get to the third act. It's gonna be crazy. And then they're like, we're still looking for the fly. I'm like, no, it's impossible. They can't still be doing this. What's going on? Like I was freaking out, dude. Yeah, because that episode is insane, and it's funny how like it's regarded as like one of the best ones.
It divides people. A lot of people are either like it's the best one or the worst.
I wanted to die. I was like, "What's happening? This can't be the whole episode. This is a joke, right?" Yeah. And then I kept watching, and I was like, "No way! They're still doing this."
I binged Breaking Bad too. So when that
happened, did you freak out or what?
Well, I was like, this is a really weird direction they're taking, but I'm into it. But like, I can only imagine watching week by week. And
I didn't watch. I watched it. Yeah. I binged it.
So. Yeah, I binged it too. But if you're watching that week by week and that's your episode,
oh my god, week, that's probably way more divisive.
Yeah,
that would have pissed me off a little more.
But he did direct the second to the last episode.
He did. Is it Ozymandias?
Ozymandias.
Yeah, that one's a great one too.
The only thing on IMDb to ever hold a 10 out of 10. On there,
it's a great episode. It's one of my favorites, to be honest.
Yeah.
For sure. Let's jump into Star Wars. If you guys have heard of it, The Last Jedi.
Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars.
Yeah, nothing but Star Wars, making $220 million this weekend. Jesus. Everyone and their moms and their cousins and their daughters and their sons saw this movie. It's crazy. I was talking to my mom about this, but my entire office saw this movie Thursday night. Every single person. I've never had that experience because I saw Thor. I work at a TV network, right? Mm-hmm. So we keep up with films and movies in the industry. But we love movies. But the fact that everyone saw this on the exact same day, which is Thursday night, so that the entire office the next day can talk about it with spoilers, and you just have like this giant office of people just screaming at the top of their lungs, giant spoilers, and we feel free because everyone saw it, so we're not afraid. But the fact that everyone from the editors to the producers to the presidents to like everyone saw this movie the exact same time, and I was just like, I've never experienced that, man. It's crazy how many people, whether you're, old, young, anyone saw this movie. It's crazy how much money this thing is garnering, and the fact that it's kind of split. Like for the most part, people like it, but it's a lot more split than I thought it was gonna be. And I remember texting you about the premiere reactions.
Yeah.
Because I was nervous because I want my reactions to be very much like
it's perfect.
Yeah, it's perfect. Because if people say it's perfect, that means it's good.
yeah. Basically, in these days,
if people say it's good, that means it ain't good at all.
Yeah.
So I want to hear your thoughts, just general thoughts first. Reaction coming out of The Last Jedi.
Well, let me preface this by saying,
I said first. No, I'm playing.
Let me just preface this. You know what I mean? I said before in this podcast, Brick's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah.
Looper's one of my favorite science fiction movies of all time. Going into this,
and now The Last Jedi is one of your favorite movies. No, I'm playing. Go ahead.
I don't know about that, man. This I only watched it once, so I gotta.
Sure. Same.
I'm still absorbing it a little bit. Still gotta. So there's a few things to get in on. This is spoiler heavy, by the way, people. So spoiler alert tag, is going to go and everything. Ultimately, though, I think there's more in this movie that I like than I didn't like. But the things I didn't like almost makes me want to punch a wall. You know what I mean? Like there are some things in this movie that happens that I always think. There's a theory. I think that if you're like, especially for fan movies, like movies that are made for fans, if there's one scene that throws you out of the movie, you're never going to be able to get back in, right? I think that's with Spider-Man 3 with the dancing in the sidewalk,
which I love, by the way.
That's Iron Man. That's Iron Man 3 with the Mandarin, and to me in this movie, it was when Princess Leia takes off and starts flying like Superman.
Oh, really?
I'm like, I
that happens early on too.
I couldn't believe what I was watching, dog. Honestly, like I was almost like, what, I don't know. To me, that was like you crossed the kind of a line to me. You know what I mean?
Really?
Like,
that's such I noticed that people are like, but overall, you're saying
overall
you didn't like this movie.
Overall, it's kind of a very big disappointment for me.
Okay.
But as I've kind of softening the blow more and more I think about it, because there are a lot of elements in there that are like really genuinely great elements that are really that I really attached to a lot as a film goer and as somebody who loves Star Wars. I think the different elements of this movie really helps the movie in terms of how much more complex it is than any other Star Wars movie. It's easily the most complex Star Wars movie you've ever seen, no doubt. And there's obviously a lot of big political themes that they're going off of here.
Sure.
A lot of big things in general, just about humanity and heroism and stuff like that. Spiritualism. I think they really touch really deep on, and I think is great. But just some of the sillier elements in this movie just really kind of throw me out of whack. So I'm more disappointed than I am liking it. But again, I could watch this movie again and have a different reaction to it. Maybe I'm getting over that.
And we're talking initial reactions, because again, I've only seen it once too, and it's definitely, and I mean definitely, the type of movie that you have to see again.
Yeah.
Right? Because it is a lot to digest. I definitely agree with people saying that you should watch it a second time, even if you're not a Star Wars fan.
Yeah.
Because it is a lot to digest. But I feel like people give a little bit too much credit to watching it twice. I feel like initial reactions, first and foremost, should be what you take from a movie. You shouldn't have to watch a movie 2 times to get your true reaction to a movie. We saw Lady Bird once, loved Lady Bird.
Yeah.
I saw Get Out once, loved Get Out. I saw a lot of movies this year. Thor once, and I loved Thor. I saw a lot of movies this year that I saw once, and that's all I need to see for me to be like, thumbs up. Right. And I'm not saying that this is definitely the type of movie that benefits from watching it a second time. I just don't think you need a second time to get your true idea of a movie. In the sense of, they shouldn't rely on a second time to get a true reaction. Because I hear a lot of people saying, you have to watch it twice, otherwise you're not watching it. I'm like, you got to watch it once. You probably should watch it twice. You don't have to. But I'm definitely going to watch it again, because again, you're right. It's a lot to digest. For me, there's more. Walking out, I was a little bit, I was on the side of like, it's good. There's more good in this movie that I like than bad in this movie that I don't like. For me, it's always a balanced scale. I have to measure all the scenes, all the moments that for me didn't work at all, and then measure it against all the moments and all the scenes that did work for me. And when I balance it out, it's more good than bad. I liked more this in this movie that I didn't like. However, it's barely there. Like it's almost half of this movie that I liked and half I didn't like, which isn't a good, division between the two. It should be like, 80%.
Kind of the same to me too. Like there's the scene that, the Princess Leia scene is the biggest standout, but there are a lot of like smaller elements and story beats that really kind of throw the movie out of whack. So.
Sure. For me, the issue that it comes down to the most is the overall feel I have of the story progression of the movie, where I feel like they're a little bit stagnant on that. That's my biggest issue. My biggest gripe of the movie isn't the crazy, ridiculous, silly scenes that we got or the storylines that we got that were kind of crappy, like Finn's storyline. But for me, it's going into the movie, coming out of the movie, what I thought of the movie. And when I tweeted out my reaction, I realized that my reaction was essentially the same it was when it was The Force Awakens, and it shouldn't be the case. This is the second movie in a trilogy. It shouldn't be like, what I said in my tweet was, I'm excited to see what happens to Rey, and Kylo Ren's pretty cool. That's essentially what I said in The Force Awakens too. That shouldn't be the case. I should know a lot more about the overall story in this movie versus being excited for the future. You know what I'm saying? Like, when you saw The Force Awakens, you're like, I can't wait to see what happens to Rey. And then coming out of this movie, I'm like, I can't wait to see what happens to Rey, because she didn't really do much. I mean, you get what I'm saying? Like, for a movie that promised so many things, as far as like what's going to happen to the Jedi Order, what's going to happen to the future of the Force, what's going to happen between the balance of the Force, what's going to happen between Luke and Kylo and all this stuff. We got this much of it. And I know people might argue against me on that point, but I really do feel like we got this much of it. Again, we're going to spoil things, but the two big things that we got was Supreme Leader Kylo Ren, because Snoke is killed, sure. And then we got Rey's parents are no one. That's it. That's it. That's all we got.
Yeah, I'd argue with you on the Kylo thing. I think we got a lot from him, though. I think
no. Kylo, to me, I told a lot of friends, for me, he was a standout in this movie, because in the first movie, they set up Rey in a way that's like, I can't wait to see where Rey goes, and they set up Kylo in a way where you're like, I don't know, but you're right. Kylo did get a lot in this movie. I just want to see more progression within that story instead of Finn and Rose, Poe fighting with Laura Dern, and I'm just like, oh, just give me back to Rey and Kylo, man. Like, that to me was like my biggest complaint in the movie.
I think we got a clear picture of Kylo Ren as a character. And from what we've seen in The Force Awakens to what we see now, it makes a lot of sense how his character would end up in this place. And
he's way better in this movie too.
Oh yeah,
he's way better in this. In Force Awakens, he's good, but in this one, I'm just like, I'm on board.
Well, he has a very powerful. I think, and that's the thing too. All the performances in this movie were like really, really, except for one standout bad performance.
Which one? It's spoilers, so
I gotta say Rose, man. I don't know, man. That to me,
really,
to me, that's kind of the worst Star Wars character.
Like, no performance though.
I mean, I guess she was doing what she was given.
She was doing what she was given, though. I mean, her story sucked, but that doesn't mean she was a bad actress. I think the performance that we got was low-key shitty. Was the two performances that I think were, like, ridiculous. And a lot of people have... I'm surprised how many people loved it. And I'm like, you like that? That was kind of whack. General Hux. Being like a freaking like over-the-top cartoon character who doesn't look like he knows 1 + 1 = 2. And yet he's like, I am part of the best. And I'm like, dude, all those cheeks shaking like crazy, man, and turning bright red, like tomato red. Yeah. And then Benicio del Toro being this over-the-top, quirky character. And I'm like, I don't need this, man. This whole storyline's already over the top. I don't need an over-the-top character in an over-the-top storyline, which is the Rose and Finn storyline, which didn't work at all for me.
Well, for me, I think that storyline worked. It was too long, though. It was too long of a storyline, and it took up a lot of time in the movie that I think could have been more satisfying for Rey and the Luke story. That being said, though, I really did love the political stuff they're saying in that. The whole 1% being this over-dominant thing. They go into this casino town, and then even with Benicio del Toro showing them, like, oh, these are the people selling the weapons. They're selling the good guys. I love that. I love that they're going to that place because... The only other time Star Wars really... I mean, Star Wars has always been kind of political, right? Even from its inception, 1977, it's very, like, anti-Nazi, all that kind of stuff. And they kind of re-update that with, like, Hux and Kylo being, like, the neo-Nazis of this universe, right? They really don't... They're really just following the legacy of the people that came before them. So I think that's a really nice way of updating that. But in terms of the political war aspects of it, we don't really see a lot of that unless it's in the prequels. But in the prequels, they're just standing and talking in semicircles about it. But to me, in this movie, they handle it well by showing the actions that are implemented here, right? Like how the warfare, especially with the resistance, how we're losing so much of the resistance just during this fight against the First Order. That is that really the cost? What's the cost and the effect of all of this stuff? Who is the good guys and who is the bad guys? And I like the fact that they muddy the waters a little bit with that. To me, I love that, but it stops working once you start talking about the Laura Dern character, right? To me, that almost made no sense in the fact that when she's there, when she's first introduced, it's like, okay, who is this person? We've never seen this person before. I almost feel like if it was like Admiral Akbar or something, it'll make a little more sense. But this is just a person we've just
also. I mean, freaking R.I.P. Admiral Akbar. They did you dirty, bro. They did him dirty. Oh, they didn't even show his death. They just said Admiral Akbar's dead too. Bruh, who's going to tell us when it's a trap, though? Like, for real. No more trap music, dude. Trap is dead. Dude, for real. They did him dirty in there.
Yeah, they did, man. RP, man.
Damn. But anyways, go back
to but again, like, with her storyline, it kind of almost would have made more sense if she just told Poe from the beginning what the plan was, right?
100%.
Like, if she just would have said it, like we would.
Honestly, at that point, I was ready to shoot her too. I was cheering for Poe. I was like, yeah, Poe, kill her.
Because she kind of listen. If we're talking real world politics here, she kind of just represents the establishment, right? She's just like the rich, like overpowered lady who was there, implemented by the government to run this rogue resistance. Meanwhile, Poe is the one who's actually doing the physical work,
and he has all the experience.
And he's kind of sidelined. Again, I know he makes a lot of mistakes, and I like the movie that they kind of show you his mistakes as a leader, and that he's resulting in the deaths of all of these great heroes. But that being said, she doesn't have the war knowledge, and she doesn't have the actual fight of being there. She's just implemented by, oh, here's the government.
Sure.
Or here's the underground, person that we elected. What I mean? Without consulting the rest of the crew. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. It makes me angry as like in real life. Somebody who follows politics is like, what do you? So anyway, so that's why when Poe overthrows her, I'm like, yes, this is the movie.
Me too. I was like,
this is what I'm going for. But then Leia comes in and then shoots Poe. I was like, oh, okay. But then we get to understand the plan. It's like, okay, that does make a lot of sense. But at the end of the day, she's still wrong. She's still wrong. Yeah.
If we would have went Poe's plan, it would have worked. You know, if Poe's plan would have more support. Of course, that plan fails too with Finn and Rose. But it's like, I don't know, man. A lot of it was
I also feel like one good thing and one good little detail that I liked, and it's a tiny little moment, but the moment when Finn and Rose are pitching their plan to Poe.
Yeah.
And they're like, I got a plan. We're going to do this. He's like, all right, that's where we blow it up, right? And he's like, I like where your head is at, but no, we're not going to blow things up. I kind of like that they made Poe a little bit more like a little too gung-ho, a little too like ready to shoot, a little too trigger happy, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
I kind of like that. I was like, that's kind of a cool little detail in his character that you might think it's good, you might think it's bad, of him being like a little bit too much of a hotshot,
right?
And wanted to blow things up all the time. It's like, that's where we blow it up, right? And it's like, all right, bro, we don't have to blow everything up, man.
Right.
Even though eventually they did blow it up.
Right.
They followed Poe's plan to blow things up, because they were eventually like, that's probably the best thing to do.
Yeah.
Turn this ship around and kamikaze this thing, bro.
Yeah.
That's
great sequence, by the way, when she
that was so cool.
That
was so cool.
It's like all in silence, and then like.
And my friends and my friend of mine who's a Star Wars fan was talking. He's like, why didn't he do that before? That's like the best plan you can do. Go to hyperspace and go kamikaze hyperspace.
Yeah,
that's so freaking cool. But anyways, for me, I'm with you. I feel like every side story for me, to be honest, didn't really work. Especially the Finn and the Finn and Rose one didn't work for me. I get what you're saying about Canto Bight and showing that.
Canto Bight.
I just feel like they don't really know what to do with Finn's character that much. Like, I feel like even that was a little bit more of Rose's story than it was Finn's story.
Yeah, I think what the Force.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, what I was gonna say is that the Force Awakens kind of. The way they establish these characters is like our Luke is Rey, our Han Solo is Finn, and our
Han Solo is Poe.
No, I kind of say he's the Leia only because like the way they set him up, he's the one who sends the secret message.
You're right. Sure.
So to me, he's kind of like and he's also the war general. So I kind of make the Leia comparison. But I mean, he could be seen as the Finn too. But Finn's kind of he could be seen as the Han Solo. But Finn's kind of wearing even like the Han Solo outfit.
Got you.
With the jacket and the white shirt and everything. But to me, it's like. If you were to send Han Solo, if The Empire Strikes Back sent Han Solo on a mission with just a random woman character halfway through the movie, I think most people would be pissed with that too, right? Because all we know of Han Solo is just he's his own agency, his own agenda. He just kind of wants to get out. And what Finn, and as we established Finn in the beginning of this movie, he doesn't want to be a part of this anymore. He just wants to help Rey and get Rey back. That's all he really cares about. So,
dude, I feel like Finn is one of the weakest parts of this movie, not because of his character. I like Finn. I like his character. I like John Boyega's acting. I like pretty much everything about Finn. I just felt like they set him up to be something that could have potentially been something really cool. Like, think about it. Ex-Stormtrooper, went against the First Order, doing his own thing kind of thing. And I was like, all right, this is cool. I like this character. And then what you do with The Last Jedi is you essentially don't do anything with him and just give him the storyline that's kind of empty, to be honest with you. That's just my issue with Finn. At least with Poe, I was semi-interested in the Poe storyline. But with the Finn storyline, I was like, dude, come on. Get me back to Rey and Luke, because this is not working. Or Rey and Kylo. Rey and Kylo was great. I love the freaking communication they were having.
Oh, yeah, when they're
Force.
just... Yeah,
that was cool. I was like, this is really cool. I love seeing progression of the Force. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of people, that's one of their biggest criticisms of this movie, is the Force. Mm-hmm. To me, that's progression. You can't keep telling us about this ancient mystical power and not show us how it can advance, right?
Yeah.
Besides floating rocks, floating ships, floating this, floating that, force lightning. Now you got to step it up. You got to introduce us something different. And they did that with the communication calls and with the astral projection thing that Luke did.
Astral projection was new.
That was cool. Yeah, I thought that was freaking cool. And when they showed that, I was like, that's new. And that's cool, and it's new. And it's something that you can say,
new fans of Star Wars can have that. Kids who are now watching The Last Jedi can say astral projection mode or whatever when they're playing, and old fans can accept it because it's a continuation of the same thing.
What came before? Exactly. That's exactly what I was
so
going
good.
For. Exactly what I was going for, because when it's kind of like the Jedi mind trick, but you're just kind of playing it on everybody essentially.
Exactly.
And of course that takes a lot of power in the Force, and that's why Luke ultimately, he
gives himself up and dies.
Right, because he's used so much of his power. So that made a lot of sense. And again, like you're right, it introduces a new power of the Force. I mean, every generation has their new kind of thing, right? From the lightning to the Jedi run or the Force run to now this. Mm-hmm. It's just going back to the Leia thing, man. I don't know if that was a Force thing.
It's everyone has an issue with that. It's a very split thing as far as I love that scene. At first, I was like, this is weird. But then I was like, are you kidding me? Like, if you really have a Skywalker, you think a Skywalker is going to die that easy? Hell no. Of course the Force is going to be strong in her and protect her and take her back to the ship. Like, that to me made sense because of the fact that she is so powerful in the Force, and that I personally know that. I get that a lot of people might not know that.
Well, they don't tell us that.
They don't tell us that, but they did tell us that in the Return of the Jedi, when we know that Leia has that power too.
Yeah,
and we know that she's strong in the Force.
We don't
know.
So
when she's out in space and floating, I was like, she can't die like this. I mean, she's got the Force, man. The Force will protect you. I don't know. I liked it. I get how the crazy cheesiness of her flying like, freaking Jesus or Superman Jesus. I get that was kind of cheesy, but the concept of the Force protecting her in itself and not letting her die in space, I was cool with it. A lot of people are like, that's impossible. I'm like, the Force is freaking powers.
Well, that's why I don't get that though. I mean, if she is, did she bring herself back to life? Did the Force bring her back to life? Like, or did
Skywalker blood, brah.
Okay, but
midi-chlorians.
I think even this movie, like, it spelled the whole, like, whatever.
Well, not really. I mean, Skywalker's still powerful in the Force, though.
Yeah, but she was never trained in the Force.
That's what I'm saying. That's how powerful she is in the Force. Yeah. That she's not even trained in the Force, and she can still do that. That's how powerful she is.
But then she does that.
Rey was never trained in the Force in this movie either.
I mean, she gets trained in the Force.
We got no training with Rey. Not at all, dude.
She has, like, her own, like, training montages,
Not
though.
really.
She's training on her own.
She's training on her own, but on her own. She's not getting trained.
Yeah.
That's one. Two, I don't know. That pissed me off because we jumped from a movie where we're like, wow, why is this girl so powerful in the Force? And then we jump to this, and then they're like, oh, because, the Force chose her. And I'm like, cool. Now, can we get some progression on what that means? And we get none of it. We just get, like, wait for the next movie. And I'm like, oh, we've got to wait for the next movie to find out what like, for me, the Yoda stuff, right? Because when Yoda came in and was like, hey, screw the Jedi, let's do this, let's restart, let's push the restart button, let's do something different, Luke. Train Rey, go help her out or whatever, and let's do something different. And I was like, all right, cool, tell me more. And then it just cuts and it, keeps going to Finn and Rose and stuff. And I'm like, oh, dude, I want to learn what's going to happen to the Jedi Order. I want to learn what's going to happen to the Force. And I feel like we get this much of it in this movie. Yeah. Like, that's what I want to know. Well, one small little thing, and I'm interrupting you, but it's worth it. Shout out to JTE. I thought of JTE when Yoda sat down and he's a Force. And I'm like, hashtag Go Sit is real, dude. Go Sit is canon, it's real, and it's cool. So you can stop, JT.
I think that scene was funny, especially considering how much the Star Wars canon people are how big of the deal the Journal of the Wills thing has become recently. I've never got it. I've never understood what this whole shit was about.
Sure.
But then they're just kind of like, oh fuck it, we're just blow it up. You know what I mean? So I thought that was nice. Especially for.
But I want to know what that means, though. Right. Like, I don't know. I'm just
as a casual fan like me, I'm just like
as a hyper fan. I'm like, what is the Jedi Order going to do? What it's going to establish the Force or the balance of the Force? I'm like, all these thoughts are coming in my head.
Yeah.
Let's talk about things that you did like scenes or something. What's your favorite scene in this movie?
I definitely. There's a lot of great scenes in this movie. Again, that's the thing. Like the whole opening thing where it was Rose's sister and she had she was on a bomb carrier and it was like the effects of. It was like the whole slow motion of the thing falling, the suspense of that. Brilliant.
That was super cool.
Absolutely brilliant. For me, like when you're starting a movie like that, I'm like, this is This is the combination of Rian Johnson and Star Wars that I've been looking forward to.
Sure.
So that was great. I loved the moments where Luke was educating Rey on the Force.
Sure.
And giving her, when they had the whole montage of filling the Force, and it cuts to the different wildlife on the island and the water and the ocean. It was doing that montage again.
Oh, the montage.
Yeah. Again, Rian Johnson, king of montage, man. Brilliant stuff there. Like that whole montage really gave me, as a casual fan, really gave me understanding what the Force was, the space between spaces. You know what I mean? I finally got that. I thought, and again, I know a lot of people don't agree with the Rey and Rose stuff. It is weak. It is a weaker elements of the film, but I just love the political aspects of it. I love the political aspects up until the ending with the Laura Dern and Poe stuff. And even when we finally start, and the communication between Rey and Kylo, like you alluded to before, cool. when they would cut to like the match shots of them look like in the same frame, like just from the framing level of them looking at each other, and like that little quick edit, like where it just flipped like just that little bit, it was beautiful. So the way they handled that was really, really great. And I think it's very consistent with the Star Wars feel, right? And when they finally meet up and they finally confront Snoke, that was really cool as well. Again, another like FU to like the big sweaties, right? Like they just kill Snoke like that. But again, I don't know. This is kind of more of a pet peeve, I guess, but the criticism. A lot of people were saying this was unpredictable. I don't know. I kind of saw a lot of the stuff that was happening coming, except for the flying Leia. But everything else, but I felt it coming because it felt natural, right? I could see when Kylo was put in that position why he would make the decision to kill Snoke, because Snoke just dehumanized, demanded him, right? Like he was like
degraded him,
exactly, right. He tells him like he was the one who sets up the connection from Rey and Kylo. He's the one who starts setting it all up. I love that aspect of it, and I love that ultimately is what Kylo decides to make that decision. And that's you almost think, oh, is he going to go to the dark side or the light side? But again, his decision makes sense of where no, he doesn't want to go light. He just wants to be his own man. He wants to be his own authority figure. So that was great. And then that whole scene where they're fighting the red ninjas, dude, that was awesome. So again, a lot of great stuff in this movie. Ultimately, the ending kind of felt weird and weak to me, especially when it was finally. Again, this is Finn. It's more of a negative, but when Finn was finally going to like ram his like self-sacrifice himself, I was like, this is great. Finally, we're getting a great moment with Finn. He's getting his moment, and then Rose takes it away from him. I'm like, ah. But that moment leading up to that was like, yes, finally, yes. And I also I like the whole idea of the Resistance being this sparse now. Like they've literally lost everybody. The whole Resistance could fit on the Millennium Falcon basically now, right? Like that's crazy to me how this little fight, but how is that going to matriculate into the next thing? So there again, a lot of positive aspects of this movie, and like I said, it's probably more that I liked than I didn't like. But what were some of the moments for you that
you named? A lot of it. A lot. I almost called him Rilo. Kylo Ren killing Snoke was badass. Everything you felt was exactly how I felt. I felt like it was a big fu to Snoke. It was a big it was Kylo tricking Snoke. Basically, he tricked him. He showed him that it's crazy how. As powerful as Snoke was in the Force, Kylo was kind of stronger in the Force in that moment because I felt like he almost Jedi mind tricked Snoke into thinking I'm on your side, and he's like, Kylo would never betray me. Kylo's my homie. He's my little bitch, bro. I mean, he's never gonna be. And he kind of Jedi mind tricked Snoke into thinking that, and then so when he cut him, he just did not see it coming at all, at all, because. It's almost Kylo pulling the rug over his eyes. I thought that was so cool. And the fact that when they were fighting back and forth, and then eventually when they were done and they killed everyone, and then Rey was like, let's go help my friends. Kylo was like, you for real? Nah, bro. I'm not good. I just wanted to kill Snoke. I don't know what you're thinking, but my plan was to kill Snoke, and now I'm the Supreme Leader. I'm the boss. You know what's crazy? The scene when he goes to Rey. And he says, after that, and Rey's like, let's help my friends. And Kylo's like, dude, forget the past. Like, screw the Jedi, screw the Sith, screw the Resistance, screw everything. Let's just do our own thing. Let's start new. Like, just come on, let's just do our own thing. I can't lie. I was 100%. That speech got me. I was like, come on, Rey, join with like, I wanted her to like join it.
Me too. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be cool? Like, just do no Sith. No, don't dark side, light side. Just screw all of it. We just do our own thing in the Force. Like, not worry about rules and Jedi Order and Sith rules and the Sith Order. I wanted her to be like, yeah, bro, let's do it. Just do the freaking, like, Arnold Schwarzenegger Predator. You son of a bitch. And then just do that. And flex their Force muscles. Like, that's what I wanted.
They just grow like blue muscles as they're shaking hands.
But for real, that got me when he said that. I was like, damn, he's right. Like, forget all these old people making all these rules. I felt like it was a big F you to old people too. Like, I'm not necessarily like screw, but for me it was like all these old people with these old, like, it's time for the youth to take over. It's time for young people to have their place. Like, when he basically did that, that's what I felt, and I thought it was very purposeful, making Snoke look like he's super old too.
Oh yeah, decrepit.
Making him look all old and decrepit. It's like, I've been here for years, and it's like, dude, screw you, screw old people. Like, it's time for the youth to rise up and take their own stand.
Yeah,
like, that's what I felt like Kylo was saying in that moment, and I loved it. I was like, that's so cool, and it makes so much sense.
Even the last shot of the movie alludes to that theme going further, right? With the new set of young Jedi that we see. At the end of the thing. So.
And the fact that Kylo is Supreme Leader now. Such a young, brash Supreme Leader.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to go into comments.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say before we jump in?
Yeah, I mean, again, I really want to see this movie again. I need to engage it a little more, see if there's maybe some of the things that I didn't like, maybe just I could just wash over.
That's kind of what I had to do. I mean, there's a lot I didn't. Like, pretty much everything with Rose and Finn, I just didn't like.
Do you like Rose's? Because I don't like her as a character. Like, I think she's a terribly written.
I think her character was just there to give Finn a partner.
Right, or just to, and I think she was also like the audience eye through this one too.
But I also feel like it was just like. As bad as this sounds, I feel like they were like, everyone's talking about Rey and Finn. We gotta let's give Finn a love interest.
Yeah,
let's give him a love interest.
And let's hook Rey and Poe up to. Oh, man. It's like, come on, man. I don't know, man. I don't know if this is just me.
You want Kylo and Rey to do it?
No, I wanted Finn and Rey. We gotta put two white people
but that's what they were. I kind of felt like that's what they're doing. They're like, everyone keeps talking about Finn and Rey. Yeah, we can't have that. Let's put Rose in there.
Diversity, interracial.
No. Let's put Rose. Let's give her an Asian homie.
This is why we're not invited to Star Wars.
You heard that, guys? We're not invited because of us. No, I definitely felt like she was just a love interest that they wanted to give this character.
Right.
Let's jump over to the comments. Xavier says, I felt like almost all the humor was added in post. I felt like Disney was like, hey, that scene's too dark. It's going to scar children's. Add BB-8 doing some funny stuff or that pork. I don't care. I'm with you, Brian. A lot of it felt weird to me. Brian?
Yeah, uh-oh. Is that
Beardo in there?
Keeping up in our, in our Twitter mentions? Yeah, Brian had asked, did we like the humor in The Last Jedi? That was his initial question.
No. Yeah. If someone says, did you like the humor? No.
Yeah.
There was some humor parts in it. I liked the Luke humor. I thought the Luke humor
was
worked.
good. And when him throwing the
like,
big climactic moment of the last movie, just like...
That was cool. Anything with Hux, anything with Rose, anything with Benicio del Toro.
Hux especially was...
It was terrible.
No, not Hux.
It was terrible.
Yeah, with Hux, when he was starting the your mom joke, I was like, oh, man, what is this? Is this Star Wars? Are we seeing really a your mom joke in the Star Wars movie?
Which one was a your mom joke? I missed that.
When Poe is like fucking with him on the phone, like he's like like in the very beginning.
Dude, come on, that was I mean, Schmo's Beardo asks us. Brian asks us, did we like the humor? Basically, to answer his question, no. I didn't like the humor at all. I felt like that was one of the worst parts of the movie.
Yeah.
Max says, who was the green ghost guy? I don't know. I don't know who that was. Could have been like an old Jedi or something.
Yeah, it might have played an important part. By the way, I gotta say, I saw some of my homies. I saw it a little later than I saw Friday night because I just go with my homies from like high school, and they're not like big Star Wars. They're not big movie fans. They just see movies with me just cause. But they're like, oh man, Yoda's a puppet again. Oh man, I don't know about this. What are you talking about? The Yoda puppet was probably the coolest thing. Like
they did it good. Everyone keeps saying this, but it's so true. The first time you saw it was kind of weird. I was like, whoa, this is weird.
Yeah.
Second time, and I was like, this is cool.
This is great puppeting.
Cool.
Right
it was really, really well done. Danielle says, 1, Rian Johnson looks a lot like my English professor from this past quarter. Cool.
Oh, nice.
2, the epic scene with Laura Dern reminded me of Independence Day. Yeah, I mean, it could have been Independence Day with freaking Finn ramming into the... I thought it would have been like a cool Independence Day kind of moment.
Exactly.
I would have loved if he actually sacrificed himself. Because when he was doing it, he was like, I'm going in, I was like, that's cool. Because now... everyone's going to remember Finn as, like, the badass hero. But now Finn is going to be like, what are we going to do with Finn in part 3? I don't know.
Yeah.
I would have liked Finn to sacrifice himself.
That's what I was looking forward to. I was like, finally, my man gets the moment. But he didn't.
I have one from Jose Miguel who says, do you think it's possible if the Jedi can become Force Ghost when they die, is it possible Sith can do the same and we see Snoke return? Just wondering because he was defeated way too easy for me. Yes and no. When it comes to Sith, yes, we've seen that on Clone Wars, and we've seen that in other
Darth
lore.
Maul coming back. You think he could get the...
Well, Darth Maul's different because he actually came back. He didn't come back as a ghost. But to answer your question, Snoke is done. I guarantee they're done with Snoke. Snoke was literally just a throwaway character to have a big, creepy-looking bad guy and to be the red herring, basically, of the Star Wars universe. I don't think Snoke is Snoke going to come back and be a major character? No. No way. Do you think it's Snoke?
No, I don't think so. No.
I think Snoke was literally just there to represent evil and to just show us that, like, hey, look at this evil guy. David Rowe says, do you think this movie will continue to be divisive over the years, or will everyone come to love it like Empire? I think it will continue to be divisive for this period, I think, for the next coming months. I think eventually when people see it a few more times, it's going to come to a consensus. It's kind of like The Force Awakens, because when The Force Awakens came out, everyone's like, it's amazing. And then eventually they were like, well, it's okay. It's fine. But I think this movie, eventually people will kind of calm down on either side.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different types of reactions to it, especially when you look at, by the way, there are some people in our kind of internet YouTube movie circle who are like, oh, don't trust the Rotten Tomato scores, the IMDb scores. It's fucking bullshit, man. To me, it's like,
what do you mean?
You know, of course. To me, it's like, why are you trying to discredit the accounts of the fans who just disagree with your opinion? Frankly, you know what I mean?
Sure.
There's the whole argument of, oh, you don't know how many people actually saw it, didn't see it. That's true. Maybe 25% people didn't watch it. It might affect the score in that respect, but still, that doesn't. To me, it's like you're discrediting what the fans are saying about a movie just because you don't agree with it, and you're going to use Cinema Score as your like counter argument. That, by the way, if you look at Cinema Score,
I think you're specifically referencing.
I don't want to specifically reference one person, but
put them on blast.
I'm not going to say names, but if there's for me, look at the statistics for Cinema Score, right? Cinema Score only collects 400 audience cards per movie, typically, right? Let's say for a big movie like Star Wars: The Last Jedi, it's really let's double it for argument's sake, 1,000, right? And 5 random cities. Let's just say for argument's sake, it's 10 random cities, right? 1,000 people collected data, gave the movie an A. Okay, then you look at a movie like The Last Jedi making $220 million per opening weekend. Let's say the average ticket price is $20, which is not. That's 100. That's basically 11 million people have seen this movie this weekend. 11 million people, 1,000 people sample size. 0.01% of the audience is represented in Cinema Score. You can't use that as an example, right? Even if the system is flawed, if you're looking at Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb, it's still a better system than measuring reaction from Cinema Score. No matter how inaccurate, if you know what I'm saying. If a scientist uses a sample size of 0.01% on like medicine or like climate change, immediately people are going to knock that down. You know what I mean? But I don't know.
No, I'm with you. I get what you're saying. But
that's
for me, I feel like a lot of it, I think people have to keep in mind general audiences, because I feel like people are forgetting that, because a lot of the hate that it's getting, it's coming from passionate people.
Like, I gotta disagree, man.
Really?
I saw it with the most general audience. I saw it in like,
because a lot of my friends who've seen it who don't give a crap about Star Wars were like, yeah, it was cool.
Yeah,
like,
well, even my friends,
they're not saying it's the best thing ever, but they're not like, oh my god, how could they do that to blah blah blah. They don't care. They're just like, oh, there was a lightsaber fight, cool. Kylo Ren's cool.
Yeah, but I don't know, man.
That to me is like,
when I watched that movie. Again, I saw Force Awakens. We don't get press screenings, so we see it with regular people.
Yeah.
When I saw Force Awakens, we saw Rogue One, people were buzzing about it afterwards, frankly. I saw this movie, man, I'm telling you, it was dead silent in front of like the most general crowd.
My crowd went nuts, dude.
Yeah, again, it's divisive. It's definitely divisive, but I don't know. To me, is one of those things. I don't know. So to me, it's like it is split, and I think there's this conversation debate's going to keep going on for a while. Same way, like
I think it's absolutely necessary though to show you what didn't work in order for there to be changes. I feel like I was thinking about it this morning. Why does there have to be silliness? I don't get this. I get humor. I just don't get silly. Like they have to know certain things are silly. Like there's a difference between funny and silly. And I feel like Star Wars is so obsessed with making silly things in order to cater toward 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we have to make a silly moment because 5-year-olds are going to love it. And it's like, why can't you just make a funny moment that everyone can like instead of silly moments that like, ha ha ha, little kids will love it. And it's like, that I don't know. That bugs me. Alex Hermes says, I'm 20 years old, so I don't have that nostalgic connection to the original trilogy, and the prequels are the prequels. But I'm finding myself loving Star Wars through this new trilogy. I feel like this is my Star Wars. Do you guys feel the same way since you are both young lads? Alex, to answer your question, I'm 26, so I grew up with the prequels.
So that's
the
your
prequels
generation.
is my generation. I was 8 years old, opening night, midnight screening for The Phantom Menace coming out, and I was like hype. So for me, it was the prequels that is my generation. So I'm because I was 8 when that came out, so that was my childhood, my generation. Darth Maul, Anakin, Obi-Wan, those are my kind of things. Even though I watched the originals first, and I was obsessed with the originals first because they did the re-release to VHS, which was in 96, 97? 97. So in 97 is when I really got into Star Wars, and that's kind of what my generation was. And then the prequels came out, and I was just like, this is my jam.
Well, for me, the prequels were out when I was a kid, but I didn't really know enough about Star Wars. But for me, my introduction to Star Wars was actually like the games. Really, like honestly, the Force Unleashed 2, Battlefront. That was how I knew Star Wars. I didn't even see the fucking movies. And then when I saw my first actual movie experience with Star Wars was The Phantom Menace when they did the 3D. You remember when they did the 3D re-release? Yeah, that was my first introduction to that. So when your first introduction is The Phantom Menace, you're just like, I don't know. But then I eventually
first introduction was The Phantom Menace, and I was like, hell yeah.
I don't know.
I was 8 years old.
Well, see, I was like 15, so I'm like, this is kind of stupid. But then like going back and watching the original trilogy. And by the way, I like the Return of the Jedi a lot more than I think a lot of people. Like
that's my goat, man. Yeah. Return of the Jedi is my favorite. Remember, we were talking to GTE about it, and he fights me till the end because he hates Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
He even puts the prequels in front of Return of the Jedi. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Return of the Jedi is the best one, dude. Yeah. It's great, right?
Yeah. It's not the best one.
It's the best one.
I'll say Empire is the best one, but it's definitely like it has some great iconic moments.
It does, man. It has. I still think it has like some of the probably the best third act that I've seen. Like, it just has really intense moments that you feel. Caleb B says, I heard in the novelization of The Force Awakens, Poe meets Rey for the first time.
Right.
And in The Last Jedi, they seemingly meet for the first time. If the novelizations are canon, this is a glaring issue. Do you think more book and movie inconsistencies are in the future? If that's I didn't know that. That's awful.
I knew that. And it was even in the original script, that whole, like how the movie ended with Poe and Rey talking like, hey, nice to meet you. Da, da, da. That was in the original Force Awakens script. And then when they cut that out, I was like, great, because Finn gets a love interest. But
you're pro Finn and Rey.
I'm pro Finn, man. Finn and Rey, man. I love it.
What would their name be? Finn Rey?
Faye?
Faye?
Faye? No, not Faye. That's not a good name. Ren? No, Kylo Ren. That wouldn't work. I don't know. Whatever. But I was like, good. This is good. Get the fucking Poe Dameron. Why is this guy neither?
But I didn't know that. I don't know, man. That kind of takes me back because that's a big issue if that's the case, because they have to keep canon canon. I mean, when it comes to canon, if you're saying it's canon, dude. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's like that. That's a big issue if that's the case.
I haven't, that's honestly when I first started, like when they first started the new canon, I was like, cool, I'm gonna keep up. I'm gonna actually have the information now. You know what I mean? Because all the other stuff is just like there's too much. It's too much material, too much in Legends. But dude, it just becomes so overwhelming. Like the books, the comics, the games. I haven't even got Battlefront 2 yet, honestly. I think a lot of it has to do with disappointment in the new stuff. Like I was so disappointed by first Battlefront. I don't remember which book in particular was one of the first ones that they came out with, but one of the first books was like, oh, this is bad. And I just couldn't, like, from that point, I was like, sure. This canon is not really worth keeping up with. But apparently it's gotten really good.
Yeah, really I know Christian keeps up with it. Perry keeps up. Ken keeps up.
Yeah, it's also frustrating, too, because you have, like, at this point, you kind of have to know the canon to get what's happening, especially in something like Rogue One. You kind of have to know these characters before.
The only canon I keep up with is probably the animated shows, which that's the only thing.
Rebels, yeah, I do check in on Rebels. Yeah.
Joe says, what were some unfair criticisms you heard about The Last Jedi and Rian Johnson's direction? When it comes to unfair, one criticism I have heard was about the Force and like, how can you do that? The Force, the blah blah blah. The Force has to stay the same. I think that's an unfair criticism because, like I just told you, the Force has to progress. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over. There's always a new introduction when it comes to powers.
Yeah, and I think you hit it on the nail because I think if you look at something like Return of the Jedi, before Return of the Jedi, you never see the Force lightning. That was the first time you see the Force lightning. So when people see that, were they freaked out the same way we were freaked out by like the Force projections? Now, I didn't necessarily like the Force projection thing. Well, I like the concept of it. I just didn't like how they tried to fake you out. Like, oh, is Luke dead? Did he just kill Luke? Like, no, that's not what happened. By the way, I didn't mention this in initially saying this, but there are very few traditions that Star Wars keeps that have been kept throughout most of these franchise, particularly minimal use of slow motion, no flashbacks, no shaky cam, all that stuff. But in this movie, they kind of break every single rule.
I like that they do. I love that they do.
Use slow motion a lot. Montage isn't a Star Wars thing. They use montage, flashback,
visions.
Yeah, visions, exactly. They go through all of that. And I think
I love it.
I like the fact that it's a distinctly Rian Johnson movie in the Star Wars universe. And I think, again, I don't know if that the young kids are establishing his new trilogy that's supposed to come in. But I'm excited. And even though I didn't love The Last Jedi, I really can't wait to see his new trilogy because the fact that he's coming up with these new ideas, all new creatures. I mean, we've never seen any of these creatures before, from the crystal wolves,
the giant titty monster.
Yeah, yeah, that was a little strange. Yeah, when he was milking, I'm like, ooh, what am I watching? Yeah, but I don't know.
We got two sets of giant titties in this movie. That creature and Kylo Ren. I saw a comment that talked about that scene, and I can't lie. I think it was a comment on Jenny Nicholson's Twitter when she was talking about how cool Kylo Ren was.
Yeah.
And someone commented and said, "Yeah, but them big old titties, though." I lost it, dude, because I was like, "That's so true. He does have like the biggest freaking." Even Ray was like, "Yo,
you put a shirt on.
Put a shirt on, man. It's a Star Wars."
See, that's the kind of humor I like, though. If you're using that humor, that's funny to me.
All right, Anthony Kotsios says, sorry if I messed up your name, says, what I loved about The Last Jedi was it created new lore. I hated the Rose and Finn storyline, but the rest of the movie was incredible. Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about how it created new things and established new things, but I wanted more of that. I wanted more of what is going to happen with the Jedi, what's going to happen with the lore, what's going to happen with the Force. Mm-hmm. Like, for me, coming out of The Force Awakens, I said, I can't wait to find out more about Rey and where that's going to go. Coming out of The Last Jedi, I say the exact same thing. I can't wait to find out about Rey. And it's like, that shouldn't be the case. We should have got more progression when it comes to the Force and the lore. More of Yoda and Luke talking. More of that, for me, would have been satisfying, because that, to me, is like, you have to move the story forward more than what you did.
Yeah. Again, I liked most of the rest of the movie. We talked about some of the moments we didn't like. Again, it's probably like the Leia thing. That's my biggest complaint. And I don't think it's not a complaint against the Force. Like, if they would have explained it, I think I would have been a little more okay with it. I think just the fact that it was like the Deus Ex Machina, like it just came out of nowhere. It's like the the T-Rex in every Jurassic Park movie. It's like, where did that come from? You know what I mean?
Man.
Yeah.
It's called teleportation.
Teleportation. Yeah. So it's like, that was to me.
You watch Double Toasted, right?
Yeah.
That's what you got.
Yeah.
It's like you can hear this thing from a mile away, but at some moments the thing just teleports. And you're like, yo, where'd it come from? I got you.
Yeah. That's kind of my bigger problem with the Leia thing, but everything else in that movie, man, was pretty good.
Yeah. We'll finish up with this question. Yeah. Delisha Russell says, "What questions do you have coming out of The Last Jedi?"
Questions. Well, I just want to see how long they're going to carry this saga on for. Is this going to be a trilogy like the rest of the movies, or is this going to continue on into another 6 movies? Or,
no, I think this is it, dude. Well, I think they made it clear that Rian Johnson's new one is going to be completely separate from this one.
Yeah, but, I mean, is episode 10, 11, and 12 going to be still about these characters, or is it gonna be? I mean, I don't know.
No, it's not. It's gonna be Rian Johnson making nothing to do with his story.
Well, is he doing episode 10, 11, and 12, or are you just doing a completely spin-off?
A completely separate spinoff.
Yeah.
It's a new trilogy.
Yeah,
new story.
Yeah, I'm curious about about like Rey and Kylo, because that's a lot of story to wrap up in one movie. You know what I mean? So
that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. I that's so much story. You can't set up in The Force Awakens and then set up again in The Last Jedi. That's my biggest complaint of this movie, is the fact that it felt like they were setting up again. And I'm like, we got that in the first movie. We're still winding up in this one. You have so much between Rey and Kylo, so much unanswered things. The only answer you got is that Rey's parents are no one, and Kylo Ren killed Snoke.
And I think that's another problem with the movie I have, the fact that they kept harping on the parents thing. To me, that question didn't matter in The Force Awakens.
Sure.
And it never really mattered to me, because I just always assumed, like, she's either the daughter of somebody or a granddaughter, or she's nobody, you know?
Yeah, but the fact that that's all we got. We didn't get anything about her powers, anything about why she was chosen in the Force, anything about what that means for the Force going forward, what that means for the Jedi Order going forward, what that means for Kylo Ren going forward. Like, what is it that we're trying to... Like you said, it's so much story to wrap up in one final film. It's too much to wrap up. They should have done that more in this one. I mean, she started her training and then she immediately left when Kylo Ren was calling to her.
Yeah, I think
that's it. That's all we got from Rey in this movie.
Yeah, I think this movie, and I think this is more of a pacing problem. I think they spent so much time with the Resistance and the Poe and the Rose that Rey was just gone for a super long time.
100%
like,
agree.
I almost forgot that, like, Rey and Luke were in this movie at a certain point.
Right? And it feels like they should have spent way more time with them and given us more from them, because they basically didn't give us anything. They just said... everything they told us we knew from The Force Awakens. It's like, oh yeah, my temple was burned down. I know. Oh yeah, it was Kylo Ren who did it. We know. He took some of our students. I know that. I know all of that from The Force Awakens. They just repeated things that we didn't know. I mean, that we did know. The only thing we didn't know was that Luke tried to kill Kylo. That's it. And then that Kylo kills Snoke. That's it. Yeah. But everything they told us between Rey and Luke was like, oh, I'm depressed in the Jedi Order. Sure. Oh, I'm, closed off from the Force. Sure. Like, all things that we could have gotten from the trailer. Like, they didn't tell us anything new in this story that progressed the overall story going forward.
We talked a lot about, and earlier in this podcast, of Rian Johnson's theme of self-obsession and how that drives his characters. And I think that is something that was really fascinating, in seeing where Luke ended up being, and where, he's kind of in he's self-obsessed with his past, with his failures. And ultimately, I think the whole arc of learning to accept your failures was powerful, and something that fit universally throughout each storyline, which is cool. That being said, though, for a Star Wars movie in particular, that is that the franchise that is so obsessed with giving the clean cut answers to all that stuff, it is a little off-putting to the fans who are familiar with the way this franchise goes to have that. And again, that's not a positive or a negative. That's more of just an observation.
Sure.
To me, I like the idea that they're going more complex with it. I just wish they would have spent more time with it. You know what I mean? Had a few more moments where we really got to... And I think you feel that through the Luke storyline, too. I think especially with the performance that Mark Hamill gives. But I just feel like that we really could have had something special if they had a little more time with Rey and her journey. Because to me, she almost didn't have much of a journey. So, like you said,
100% agree. 100% agree with everything you said. Because for me, they focused on that more Luke, more Rey, more Yoda, more Jedi Force stuff. That's the far more interesting stuff, and that's the stuff that people cared about anyways. So, all right, we got to close up because we've been at it for a long time.
The Star Wars section is probably longer than the rest of the podcast.
We'll be sure to put a time code in there. Maybe. Anyways, guys, that was our episode on Rian Johnson for the Meaning Enough podcast. Hope you guys enjoy it. Make sure you leave comments to let us know what you guys thought of The Last Jedi. Let us know what you guys think of Rian Johnson and his films. What's your favorite Rian Johnson film? Let us know down below. And we'll probably be reading that in the next episode that we have for you guys.
Happy birthday, Rian Johnson.
Happy birthday, Rian Johnson.
When we're shooting this, I don't know when it airs, it'll be a couple days after, but when we're shooting this, happy birthday, brother.
And also, congrats on $220 million opening weekend.
That's a good birthday.
That's a lot of money. It's a lot. Anyways, guys, make sure you guys leave us that comment. Make sure you like. Make sure you watch and share because we need the help. Anyways, guys, I'm Ace.
This is RB3.
And that is a Meaning Enough podcast. Peace out.